Let this be a lesson to everyone. Never, never admit. Always deny until the very last possible second. 99% of the time, it does not work out in your favor. Case in point here, the king did not know officially what was going on. He only knew about Sorscha and instead trapped not one, not two, but all four of them. Okay? And they were all too stupid to keep their mouths shut and deny.
Hi, everyone! Welcome back to the Sorscha Fantasy Podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who explore the wonderful world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with the emphasis on books. Today, we have officially finished Heir of Fire!
Ooh, man, I never thought this day would come.
It was a journey, honestly.
It was. Selena / Aelin were on a journey, as were Addison and Lorraine. We were on a journey, but we made it through. We came out on the other side, and here we are.
Exactly. And personally speaking, I feel like it was just,
oh my God.
It was a book of growth for everybody.
Literally and literally, okay?
I see what you did there. That was funny.
Thank you. I know.
Oh my God. Okay, but yeah, this book really did surprise me in the best way possible, I think. They really just balanced all the character growth, new characters, expanded worlds, lots of action. It just had everything. I feel like everything that you want in a book, almost, except for like spice, but you know.
I don't know for sure, but my impression, just based on being a person who exists on the internet, is that it gets spicier from this point on. So it's not spicy in the way that ACOTAR is, but it's implied. It's more explicitly implied, I should say.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Well, you know what's funny? Because I feel like for people that do read more spicy books than like ACOTAR, they don't feel like ACOTAR is really that spicy. I felt like ACOTAR as a series in like Fourth Wing and those kinds of series and stuff have been pretty sufficiently spicy, at least for me.
Yeah.
But I know that spicy goes much deeper than just ACOTAR.
Well, so I will say the first 4 books of ACOTAR,
right?
I thought it was smutty, but not spicy. But A Court of Silver Flames, that book was spicy. Okay, that book made me blush. Yeah. That's where I was like, oh my God. My God. So I guess it depends on how you're conflating the word smutty and spicy.
That's true. I always took smut and spice. I kind of use them interchangeably. I don't know if there's a huge difference, but if somebody does know, feel free to chat about it with us. But yeah.
We'll take it to TikTok and let the algorithm decide.
What is the smuttiest book that you have ever read? Let us know. Send us a text.
Yeah, so we can read it. And if you know what chapters are the good ones, just let us know.
True. Still fun. Anyways, as a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 59 through 68 specifically, but it is likely that references to all the books we've covered so far will come up as well. This includes TOG, Com, and Tab. If you haven't finished these books and you don't want spoilers, then please pause here and then come back when you're caught up. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series, but don't sleep on our unhinged theories. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, then next week we will be starting Queen of Shadows.
Yay!
Our plan is to cover chapters 1 through 7 to start. Y'all can see that we are increasing our chapters.
We're back to it, guys. We're almost back into the swing of things.
Next, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
Ooh, okay. Today is November 8th, and there are 74 days until Onyx Storm is released. And I got to be honest, now that we're back on track and recording more frequently, there's not as big as gaps. So I'm just kind of like, oh, that's it. So I'm a little deflated. That's okay.
Sounds good to me, though. 74 days.
Yeah,
we're getting into end of year season here,
absolutely.
So
yes, and if you have any thoughts about Onyx Storm coverage from us versus pausing TOG while we do that, or please let us know. We did get some feedback, which was super helpful. And ultimately, we want to keep the podcast relevant for you guys. And also, Addison wants to be happy and cover Onyx Storm. So whatever you can do I can have evidence to show Lorraine that we should pause TOG for our Shadow Daddy, Aedon.
Addison wants to be validated. Okay.
I do.
That's
I
basically
need it.
That is all that this is. Okay. But no, actually, it is getting much more exciting since we're getting closer. Both worlds are just so good. So
I know. But only one world has Aedon Ryerson. So
finally, if you are enjoying this show, then the very best way for you to support us is to rate our podcast, leave a review, and share it with a friend. If you have not done so yet, then go ahead and do it right now. Open up whatever app you're on and get your rating or review in because we love hearing from you all. It helps us grow our little book club community, and it also helps us on the podcast platforms. And speaking of reviews, we've gotten some more fan mail and reviews. So thank you to Alicia and Valaine most recently for taking the time to send us some text messages and leave us a review. It was very exciting to read them.
Thank you so much. I wish I could have recorded my reaction when I got the notification on my phone. I squealed in excitement. And my husband was like, "What is wrong?" And I'm like, "Look!" So truly, truly, it means so much to us that you took the time to send us some kind words, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Oops, my dogs just decided to shake right at the end of that. But
they also were extremely excited by the text.
Yes, they're so excited. They're about to start play fighting right now. But okay, also though, while we're at it, we also do want to shout out Blaine Lane, Jessica, Brio Solo, Joyce for taking the time to also put reviews in the past. Thanks to everyone.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you guys.
Just so you know, guys, I do read those. Whenever I'm like feeling a little unmotivated or I'm like, nobody even cares, I go back and read those and my commitment is renewed. I'm like, yes, we're doing it.
Yes. I feel so renewed and so inspired every time. I'm like, all right, okay.
Like, punch out these notes.
Yeah, I can do another 2 hours of editing tonight.
Like,
okay.
I can do this.
Okay, that is all for housekeeping. And now we're going to get into the episode. So we'll start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we'll dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments as well. And since this is our last episode, we will do our usual end of book wrap up, which includes our overall rating of the book, our likes, our dislikes, any lingering questions, and then theories and predictions for the next book, Queen of Shadows, as well. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Sort of happily, because it was really exciting, but also Sorscha got beheaded. So mixed bag here, mixed bag. Chapter 59. Buckle up, everyone. It's going to be a bumpy ride full of twists and turns for these summaries. Celaena and Rowan finally make it to Doranel, and shit with Maeve goes down. Maeve gives us a very, very unsatisfying amount of information about the word keys. It turns out she basically knows nothing, or at least she's pretending she doesn't. But she does enlighten us about the Vowel Princess and the mysterious word mark on Celaena's brow. Unfortunately for us, she also managed to suss out that Celaena had a pretty good idea of where the third word key was and tried to use whipping Rowan as leverage to get Celaena to cave. But the joke was on her. Celaena didn't come unprepared. She looked at Maeve, and then she set the world on fire. I love that. Fuck you, Maeve. Our list of
Maeve. Fuck Airman Hamill and fuck the King of Water.
Fuck the King. Our list is getting a little long. Ooh. Okay. Chapter 60. Celaena engulfed the entire island in flame that did not burn. Maeve wanted a demonstration, and she was going to give it to her. And then the tables turned. Celaena reveals everything she had pieced together from Emrys's stories. Maeve never gave the word keys to Brandon, and she didn't journey with Athril and Brandon to retrieve them. She instead went herself to try and steal them, and when Brandon and Athril figured out what she was doing, she killed Athril, her beloved. In the aftermath, Brandon took the keys and disappeared across the ocean. But Celaena wasn't just armed with information, she came with Goldrin and the mysterious gold ring she had found in the scabbard. Maeve demanded Goldrun, but Celaena refused, citing finders, keepers. Celaena then showed Maeve the vision of the future that Narok sent her moments before he died, but she didn't let Maeve know it wasn't set in stone. Using the ring, Celaena made a trade. The ring for Rowan's freedom from the blood oath. Maeve, reluctantly and angrily, agreed. But the twists and turns don't stop there, folks. Immediately after being freed, Rowan offered himself to Aelin and bound himself to her with a blood oath. Maeve kicked them all out immediately. Rowan and Celaena stopped at a quiet inn and she bathed and scrubbed her skin until it gleamed. And then Rowan tattooed the stories of her lost loved ones onto her back. All the while, Aelin said the prayers of her people. She spoke of their worth and their good deeds and the kind words and brave acts they performed. And when it was finally done, Rowan accompanied her to a field and she sang the final lament of her people in the ancient Fae language. No longer would they be locked away in her heart, and no longer would she be ashamed. Chapter 61. The war games finally came. The 13 were as lethal as they were beautiful, and they were ready. The 13 easily captured the blue blood egg and set their eyes on the yellow legs. In the chaos of the attack from the 13, Petra made a play for the yellow legs egg. Yellow legs egg, say that 3 times fast. But Iskra was there in a flash, and the 2 wyverns locked talons in midair. It was then that Manon heard the scream, not a scream of fury, but a scream of pain. Iskra commanded her wyvern to kill Petra's wyvern, Keely. Manon watched as Keely and Petra fell and realized only she and Abraxos were close enough to save Petra, and she didn't know why, but Manon leapt off of Abraxos, making her way to Petra. Chapter 62. Manon stuck the landing and cut Petra out of her saddle, and Abraxos lifted Manon and Petra to safety. Keely crashed into the floor of the canyon, and she did not rise again. R.I.P. The Blackbeaks won the war games. Granny Blackbeak screamed and hit Manon as punishment for not letting Petra die, but Manon didn't care. She could not stop thinking about the look in Keely's eyes as she used every last breath to try and save her fighter. The next day, the real celebration was held to honor Manon's new position as wing leader. As a reward, the matrons offered the Kraken witch they had been holding hostage. Manon stared down at the witch and prepared to enter, but the broken witch spoke. She told Manon the great secret the Krakens had kept for all these centuries, that they pitied the Iron Teeth witches for what their matrons did to them, honing them like weapons until there was nothing left but hate. Manon spilled the witch's throat on the tile floor. Manon slipped away and sat on the edge of a cliff, and she could not, no matter how hard she tried, forget what that Kraken witch had said, and despite her long life, that made her feel incredibly, heavily mortal. Chapter 63. Aedion and Chaol sat on the roof of Celaena's apartment and discussed the next steps of their plan. But Chaol couldn't stop thinking about what it would be like when Aelin, not Celaena, but Aelin returned. He knew that he would have to let her go and that he was not ready to face a future without her. Sorscha and Dorian laid in bed together, and she too couldn't find sleep because she couldn't stop thinking about the news of Aelin's return. And like Chaol, she too knew that someday she would have to let Dorian go for the greater good. But not now. She would hold on to Dorian for a little while longer. Aedion, Chaol, Dorian, and Sorscha made a plan to leave. It was the perfect cover. They wanted to accompany Chaol for a few days as he made his journey to Aniel. But things didn't go according to plan, and Chaol was summoned to the king's chambers. When Dorian heard the news, he ran to Sorscha, and as they prepared to depart, they found Amethy surrounded by guards and were escorted to the king. Chapter 64. Get ready, everyone, because this is where shit gets crazy. The king tells Aedion, Chaol, Dorian, and Sorscha that there was a traitor amongst them. Before they could process what was happening, Sorscha was forced to her knees and a guard held a knife precariously over her neck. In an almost comical scene, Aedion, Chaol, and Dorian all prepared to confess and take the blame of each other, but it was Aedion who spoke first and admitted to his treachery. Chaol, understanding the sacrifice Aedion was making, prepared to escape with Sorscha and Dorian, but then the king revealed that Sorscha had been the real traitor in the castle all along. Dorian begged for Sorscha's life, but he said no. A heartbeat later, Sorscha's head hit the red marble floor. Yeah, did not see that coming. And neither did Sorscha. Chapter 65. Chaol looked from Sorscha's head to Dorian to the king and took out his sword. And then Chaol threw down the gauntlet. He told the king that he would not serve a tyrant and there was only one true king and he did not sit on the throne. Seconds later, an arrow flew straight towards Chaol and ice filled the room, stopping the arrow in its track. Dorian got to his feet and blasted the king back with his magic. He told Chaol to run, but before he did, he turned to Dorian and told him, his brother in soul, the words he had always known were true. I love you. Oh my God. I know, stop. Okay. Dorian expelled every last ounce of power he could and collapsed on the marble floor. He challenged the king to kill him, but instead he sentenced him to a fate worse than death. Dorian screamed as they put the Wordstone collar on. No! Yeah, I'm not okay. I'm not well.
Fucking king. Every time, somehow he figures everything out and tricks everybody. And I'm like, what the, like, ugh.
Definitely check on me and send me sweet treats because I'm not okay. Chaol ran for the secret tunnels, making only one stop, to get Fleetfoot. On his way out of the castle, he stopped and took Damaris. A few minutes later, he was out of the castle on the banks of the Avery River. He made his way to the apartment and told Ren what happened, and Chaol did not hesitate when Ren held out his hand and said that together they would rescue Aedion and Dorian. Chapter 66. Granny Blackbeak told Manon that she and the 13 were to fly to Morath the very next day. The 13 flew in perfect sync. They were to arrive unseen and as quiet as possible to the Duke's Mountain Fortress. Manon resolved to ignore what that Kraken witch had said because she was Manon Blackbeak, and she had work to do. Chapter 67. A man made his way to the banks of the Avery and pulled out a lovely blade with an eagle-shaped pommel. For a long moment he stared at the sword, but there was a new sword at his side, an ancient king's blade from a time when good men had served noble rulers and the world had prospered for it. He would see that world reborn, even if it took until his very last breath. No one noticed as he threw the sword into the Avery, and it sank into its dark waters, never to be seen again. Chapter 68. Rowan tried his best to dissuade Aelin from her plan, but he was wildly unsuccessful. She would go to Rifthold, get the word key from Erebin, and go north. And then she would rattle the stars. She would do whatever needed to be done to restore a court and kingdom worthy of her people. She would go the distance because she was Aelin Ash River Galathinius, heir of 2 mighty bloodlines, protector of a once glorious people, and queen of Terrasen. She was Aelin Ash River Galathinius, and she would not be afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah! And that concludes the book report.
Wow. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, let's get into the analysis next. I do see that Addison has some overarching thoughts. So,
what a shocking
let's start
surprise.
there. I know. Please tell us.
I even wrote a note to myself to take a deep breath. So just, whoo, okay. Wow. Just, wow. I'm not really surprised that we were hit with one thing after another. After all, it is the end of an SJM book. But damn, I did not see the storyline with Sorscha, Aedion, Chaol, and Dorian coming. Nor did I anticipate Selena besting Maeve. So that was really, really exciting. I feel like the previous set of chapters, I sort of predicted that a little bit. Like it seemed kind of follow a more predictable trajectory. But everything after that, I was like, oh, what? What? I just kept getting more and more insane. So that was really exciting to read. And secondly, I feel that this book set us up beautifully for an absolutely incredible, exciting journey in Queen of Shadows. And I'm just so psyched to move on. I'm ready for Aelin to go back to Rifthold, okay? Not Selena Sardathian, Aelin Ash River Galathinius. I'm ready.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. I am a little sad, though, that Rowan doesn't get to go.
Okay, I have thoughts about that. We'll talk about when we get there, but I was just kind of like, okay.
No, especially like now more than ever, she really needs people there to help her.
Yes.
And also where we left off, she's basically by herself right now because Aedion's captured. Chaos fleeing and Dorian's been captured. I was like, no, literally everybody that was on her team is captured or fleeing for their lives. And I was like, what is she gonna do when she gets back?
She literally could not be in a worse position. The only thing that could be worse is if they were all dead, you know? And actually, in a way, that may have been easier because she wouldn't have to worry about trying to rescue them. But now they're all captured. So now she's like, oh, great, I have to get the word key and rescue all these men who are stupid and got themselves captured.
Oh my God.
Leave it to a man.
I know. The fucking king. He just knows every damn time. I guess it would be way too Well, there'd be no story if they didn't get caught,
Well,
I guess. There'd be no
yeah.
conflict.
Listen, if the king was
But
stupid, he wouldn't have been successful, okay? So he's got to be
true.
smart.
Fair enough. Yeah, at least though, Aelin does have knowledge of what's going on, and she has some experience against the Valg, so she knows what
Yes.
to expect. So that's good, I guess.
That's true.
at
She's
bare
not flying
minimum.
in blind. Yeah.
Otherwise, totally agree. Retweet everything you just said. These books just keep getting better and better as we progress through this series. And I feel like every book we transition, we're like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Like,
Oh
so
my
exciting.
God.
Oh my God. So exciting. And it just keeps
Oh, I
tumbling
know.
like that. But I am mostly just hoping for a lot of ass whoopery in Queen of Shadows.
Yes.
Courtesy of
Yes.
Selena, or Aelin, I should say now. Aelin. I think I'm ready to transition.
I think so
I keep
too.
I kept like typing Selena sometimes, but I kept also wanting to call her Aelin, and I was like, I don't know if it's time yet. But I think moving on, I'm going to embrace just calling her Aelin moving forward. So
I think so too. I did the same thing in the same sentence. It'll be like Selena, Aelin. Wait, who is she? Who does she want us to be? Or who does she want herself to be? Who does she want us to
the
call
queen,
her?
the queen,
Our queen. Yeah, I think
Our
we can call her
queen.
Aelin now.
Aside from that, it's about damn time that Arobin Hamel and the King of Otterland feel some consequences from their actions. Okay, I'm so ready.
It's about time. It is about time.
Damn time. Yep. Okay, so let's get into chapter 59 in our analysis.
So we start off this chapter with Rowan and Selena arriving in Doranel. First and foremost, it's too bad Maeve is a monster because Doranel actually sounds gorgeous. I was kind of like, damn, I want to go here, but it's also ruled by a monster, so that's kind of a downside. Secondly, we learn later that Maeve built the city out of stone because she feared Brandon and his firepower. I think it's interesting that so much of the description describes it as being surrounded by water. It is quite literally built on an island, and there's a giant-ass waterfall in the castle, surrounding the castle. And I can only assume that this is just another precaution against Brandon's firepower or any descendant of Brandon.
Yeah, I remember that was one of Aelin's thoughts when she puts it together. And I guess this is foreshadowed and then it's revealed why, like, pretty quickly. But still, I don't remember thinking about it until Aelin herself has that thought. And I was like, oh. And then I started being like, oh, like, why?
When she said it, it seems so obvious. I'm like, dang it. I think I actually wrote that in our notes. We'll talk about it when we get there. But Aelin also describes Rowan's mood as silent and brooding. And I thought it was notable that she describes one morning when she awoke, he was staring at the sunrise. And it's described as looking for all the world as if he'd been having a conversation with it. She hadn't had the nerve to ask if he'd been praying to Mala Firebringer or what he would even ask of the sun goddess. I feel like Mala gets brought up so many times in this set of chapters, and I know we're going to talk about it a lot. But we later learn that Rowan did, in fact, pray to Mala when he and Aelin discuss it before she returns to Rifthold.
When she returns to
Rifthold. Okay. Before she returns to Rifthold. And we'll talk about what we think he prayed for when we get to that chapter, because I have some thoughts, but I did want to note it here.
Yes.
You know what he prayed for.
Yes. Also, I do wonder, is Mala the main goddess the Fae worship? You know what I mean? Because the way that Rowan prays to her, I did have a question about what is her relationship to Rowan and just Fae in general. We already know that there's something going on between Mala's presence and Aelin and everything. But I was just generically wondering if Mala is one of the main goddesses that the Fae in general just pray to. You know what I mean?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think we know enough about the world building to know if there's like a hierarchy of gods that they worship and pray to. I don't know, but she does seem pretty prominent, I will say. I also think it's important to note the description of how Aelin feels after Rowan prays to Mala. It's described as, but there had been a strangely familiar warmth wrapped around the camp, and she could have sworn that she felt her magic leap in joyous response. She didn't let herself think about it. So first and foremost, yet again, another line of, she didn't let herself think about it. She would think about that later. She pushed the thoughts aside And I'm so sick of that. Quit doing that.
Tell us now.
Tell us now. But I did think it was important to note that this is the second time there has been a description like this. The first was a day at the ruins of the stone temple of Mala as she places her hand on the stone. It's described as she moved away from the carving of the mythical stag, instantly cold as she severed contact with the delightful heat living within the stone. Part of her could have sworn that ancient, strange power was sad to see her go. I wanted to call attention to this because you know what I like to say. Once is an introduction, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is intentional. Anything after that is just icing on the cake. And Mala gets mentioned so many times, as well as this warm presence. And so I just want to note that here. And I know we'll continue to discuss Mala and the firepower and her relationship to Brandon and all that, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I do have what I would describe as the beginnings of a theory to introduce. And maybe this is not as groundbreaking as I thought as I'm saying it, but whatever. I think there is definitely some broader connection between Brandon and Mala. Maybe he's a descendant of her or a lover. Maeve even tells Aelin in our little download about Brandon that Mala loved him fiercely. It's not expanded upon, so we don't know if it's a romantic love or like a parental love. But we do know that Aelin is a descendant of Brandon, and it's clear their firepower comes from Mala. I don't have a ton more to offer, but I just want to note it here that I think there's a significant connection and it's going to continue to be explored as the series progresses. And then I have to be honest, I wrote, damn it, Lorraine, maybe you were right about the God stuff. Maybe you were right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. No, that's so true. I did remember reading that line and I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is it just that she favored him as a fae and wanted the lineage to continue on and prosper? Or is it truly like Mala and Brandon were lovers? Because you also have to wonder, how did Brandon get firepower that now Aelin possesses, right? Because I remember thinking like, oh, okay, the fire that Aelin has, I think we talked about this in the last episode. We were like, oh, okay, Aelin's fire probably comes from Mala, but we haven't actually addressed how that firepower came to exist in their lineage. And so now I like this theory.
Well,
I like it
wondered if Brandon is the bastard child of Mala and a fae. And that Mala could not claim him because she's a god and he's a fae and he would be at risk or something. And then the fae male, for whatever reason, bailed. And so the only thing she was able to do as his mother was to bestow a gift of power and, favor him and bless him. I mean, you could go a lot of different directions with it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. What's going on?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but I like it.
Tell us. Tell us.
Confirm our theories, please. Thank you. Okay. So I really didn't have much analysis for this portion of this chapter other than to say that it was pretty somber. I truly felt this meeting was going to go a lot worse than it ended up being because the language felt so foreboding around everything.
Absolutely.
I was like, but despite this, I did really like that Selena entered with confidence, even if she didn't know how Maeve ultimately was going to react. And despite the distance that she could feel from Rowan leading up to them arriving and talking to Maeve, there was a quote that I liked that said, she reminded herself of her plan of what she needed to accomplish before she left the city. She was as much a queen as Maeve. She was the sovereign of a strong people and a mighty kingdom. She was the heir of Ash and Fire, and she would bow to no one.
Yes, I am so happy to see our cocky, arrogant girl back. Except this time, it doesn't just feel like false bravado. It feels like she is truly empowered and confident. And I love that even more.
Yes. So, she's embraced herself. And
I know. I'm here for it.
She gives no fucks. Okay.
No fuck.
Ain't nobody going to tell her.
She'll burn that bitch down.
Exactly. The other thing that I wanted to note is that once they entered Maeve's palace, there was a description that said tiny streams sometimes gathering in pools freckled with night-blooming lilies. Jasmine wove around the massive columns and lights of colored glass hung from the arched ceilings. And this sounds just so reminiscent of a certain character and a setting within another SJM series, especially the part about the night blooming lilies and the jasmine, and then this description of Maeve's eyes, which are described as violet, starry eyes. And that's a very distinct eye color, right? I don't think we've met any other character that has violet eyes in the TOG series so far. And then there's also just descriptions of general power that sound very familiar to me as well. I don't really know what that means, but I did just want to note that.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I strongly agree. If you know, you know.
Now, we also get a little bit of background on Rowan's family that I would like to note, since prior to this, the only thing we knew about Rowan is that he's related to Mora, and Mora was one of the 3 original Fae sister queens. There are several princes in the White Thorn family, and his father's brother currently ruled over them all. His uncle had 3 sons of his own, so Rowan was never expected to take any court responsibilities. The family did, however, try to use his connection to Maeve to their advantage. Family's gonna politic, I guess, you know. Once they actually meet Maeve, Celaena manages to outmaneuver her, to some extent at least, in order to get some more information about the word keys. And through their conversation, we learn the following. So first off, the word keys cannot be destroyed. They can only be put back into the word gate. And my question was, does this mean that word gates can't be destroyed either?
I would say yes, that it means it can't be destroyed. But this also brings up for me a question about the word gate. And that is the word gate in a specific place, or can it be opened literally anywhere as long as you have the 3 word keys? Is there a specific location you have to go to with the word keys and like, this is the word gate, or if in Rifthold or Wendland, or quite literally anywhere? My leaning is that you can open it anywhere, because when Maeve is talking to Aelin, she says if the king had all 3 keys, he can open the portal at will. And that to me would imply you can do it whenever, wherever. But I am still unclear about that, and I definitely would like clarification. But I don't think that the word gate can be destroyed. I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess my sense is I would agree with that. But that's a really good question of asking, is it a physical set in stone place, or can you just conjure up the gate from anywhere? I hadn't thought about that, but now it's on my radar. The next thing that we learned is that Maeve does not know how the keys can be put back in the gate. And we see later that Celaena pieces together Brandon had actually taken them from Maeve. I'm just assuming that a lack of time to learn how to put the keys back is why Maeve never learned. But I did wonder if there's some other reason as well for why she didn't know. I could also see Maeve just choosing not to disclose that information intentionally for a reason that's yet to be revealed to us. There's just a lot of questions about what that all means, what Maeve knows, what she doesn't know. Maeve just gives bad vibes.
Oh, absolutely. So I have to disagree with the idea that she just didn't have the time to learn how to put them back. I think she had absolutely no intention of putting them back in the gate. I think she always intended to keep them, either to wield the potential of using them over her enemies or to actually just use them. I think it's very possible she did learn how to put them back and just also refused to do it. I just don't believe that she didn't know. I don't. I really don't.
Yeah, something about that seems weird because, okay, well, if they were around when the Valg came in and everything was opened, right? I'm sure they must know something about how they were removed and how the gate was open in the first place. And you could like reverse engineer that, I'm sure, and kind of be like, okay, well, it must generally be this process to put them back in. So it is weird that Maeve would be like, I don't know, you know, girl, you've been around for like thousands of years. Okay.
No, it totally is. Yeah. I would just have to imagine that during the Valg Wars, this was at the topic of every conversation. How do we get the keys back? How do we destroy them? How do we put them back in the gate? What do we do? And maybe they didn't have a set in stone plan See what I did there? Set in stone. But they had to have some kind of idea or theory that they were going to test out when it was time. I just don't believe that between Brandon, Athril, Maeve, and everybody else, they were just like, meh, we have no idea. So we'll just get them and see what happens. Like, no, there's no way.
There's more to that story, per usual. I feel like every time we have an encounter or a conversation with Maeve, it always just leads to she's hiding something. She is not giving us everything.
Absolutely. Maeve is not trustworthy.
So then the next thing that we learn is that the keys can be used to create, to destroy, and to open portals. And then Maeve also describes what the keys feel like. And she says that they are black and glittering, no more than slivers of stone. But they were not stone. They were like nothing on this earth in any realm. It was like holding the living flesh of a god, like containing the breath of every being in every realm all at once. It was sadness and joy and terror and despair and eternity. That's a lot. Very dark.
Not very demure, not very mindful.
Very ominous, very scary. So having exhausted all word key information from Maeve, who we don't feel is actually revealing everything that she knows, Celaena goes on to get info about the Valg princess instead. We learn that there are, quote, many different races of Valg, creatures that even your darkest nightmares would flee from. She also tells her that the princess rule over the Valg, who themselves are made of shadow and despair and hatred and have no bodies to occupy save those that they infiltrate. And that was obviously very interesting because this explains why they have needed the host bodies, the bodies of these mortals and the demi-fae and all the other people that they've taken over.
Or adult napped.
Yeah. Yep. Will give figure and form to something that is otherwise basically just like a shadowy ball of don't fucking touch.
Yeah, fair enough.
There are at least 6 princes, but Maeve doesn't specify how many there are, just that there aren't many, which is very unclear.
Yeah, again, doesn't feel like she's being forthcoming, but I do feel like this again takes us back to our question from the last episode. Did Aelin actually destroy the Valg princess, or did she simply destroy their mortal forms? Based on what I know about fantasy books in general, unfortunately, I have to say I don't think she actually killed them. She only eliminated their mortal forms. I feel pretty strongly that there's going to have to be a big battle and a big reveal where the Valg princes are back, maybe even in like a more enhanced form. And there has to be some exploration or discovery on how to truly and actually destroy them. And not for nothing, this is going to become extremely relevant when we try to rescue Dorian. How do we save Dorian? We can't just burn him up, you know? So we need his mortal body and mind to be intact. So I feel like this is going to be explored very heavily in Queen of Shadows because we have to save Dorian.
We have to.
We just have to.
Now, next, we get some very noteworthy information about Brandon and his lineage. Apparently, Brandon was a bastard orphan.
What?
In actual translation, he was the discarded son of nobody and remained unclaimed by either parent. We also learned that he was loved fiercely by Mala, and his flames were the only thing that held back the Valg princes during those first wars. Apparently, the mark on Celaena's brow is actually the mark of the Nameless, courtesy of Brandon being born with the bastard's mark, the mark every unclaimed, unwanted child possessed, marking them as nameless, nobody. Each of Brandon's heirs, despite their noble lineage, has since been graced with it. And I was like, what? Oh my God. But also, like, no, I was so excited about the implications of this brow mark, but instead it's literally just to indicate that this person is from Brandon's nameless bastard bloodline. I feel like there's something else to this. Like, I refuse to believe that this is the explanation for that. Aelin is so primed to be a prophetic character of some sort. It cannot just be that she is of a bastard lineage. No, I refuse.
I like how upset you are by this. It's so cute. I totally agree. I had the exact same reaction. I literally heard the record scratch where it's like, I was like, what? No. That cannot be it. There has to be more to it. I refuse to believe that this is it. Also, it would be so like sketchy-ass Maeve to give some truth without all the context. I do believe what Maeve tells her here is true, but I absolutely do not believe that's everything there is to know. That's not an acceptable answer. I'm with you. This cannot be the end of this blue word mark. Nameless is my price, all of that. Speaking of nameless is my price.
Yeah, so this does actually remind us of Baba Yellowlegs when she told Selena, nameless is my price, in exchange for information about the word keys back in chapter 40 of Crown of Midnight. And then it also matches what the King of Otterlin had thought in chapter 53 of Crown of Midnight. And his thought was, the word mark was impossible to decipher. It either meant nameless or unnamed or something akin to anonymous.
I feel like all of that, as we've talked about so many times, Sarah J. Maas in the series is masterful at placing these Easter eggs back hundreds, if not 1,000 pages, right? Because we're up to over 1,000 pages now in this series, okay? And I just am not willing to accept that this is all there is to it. I think there is more, and I think it will be revealed. However, I don't know why, but my gut says it's not going to be revealed to like book 7 or 8.
Probably not. Anyway, point being, something is not adding up about this explanation. We do not have all the facts.
The math ain't mathin', okay?
Math is not mathin'. And then another interesting point is that Selena speculates that whatever Valg creature had possessed Cain during the duel had been small enough to be contained by a wordstone ring instead of a collar. So there's a few different ways that the king has been controlling these Valgs and demons. We've heard of wordstone collars. We've heard and seen of the obsidian rings. So based off this information, I was wondering if this means that every obsidian ring that the king uses on his subjects actually contains a type of Valg creature that then infiltrates the bodies of whoever has that ring. I don't know. It's just like a side thought.
So I'm going to say yes, but with like a confused intonation. I'm confused by this because the king himself wears an obsidian ring. So then it calls into question, is the king inhabited by a Valg? Is the actual mortal man at the king still in his body? Is he still in control? Or is there just some big bad Valg operating the king's mortal form? I don't know. It's also revealed to us through Aedion's interaction with the king that he should be able to influence Aedion with it. And so we know that the obsidian rings do have some kind of power. Now, whether they hold a Valg creature or not, I'm really unclear on what exactly the connection is there. Because a lot of characters have had them. Roland, the Duke, Cain had one. So it is unclear, yet to be revealed.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, your point about the king potentially being influenced.
I mean, that's not off the table for me. I've had that thought for a while in the back of my mind. He started to fuck around with dark magic and he found out, right? He opened some portal, big bad, and got infiltrated. The thought has crossed my mind, but I have not ever found the right evidence to support it, to actually present it. But I'll just go ahead and drop that here just in case.
Well, I've always found it weird ever since we like found out about everything that's going on with the Valg and stuff. It seems impossibly difficult that the king, a person who didn't have magic, suddenly overcomes and like the tables have turned and he is now the one in charge and control of fucking Valg princess. Like, no, I don't know. The king actually is like magical or something or whatever, and he just like never told anybody and he's had all this power all along. I don't know, but it is suspicious to me that somehow a mortal king would all of a sudden figure out how to entirely control the Valg. Something about that just didn't sit right to me. Like even Fae, who are very strong, have a hard time fighting against these things, and somehow a man with no magic just was like, I have word marks.
I have word key. I have word mark.
Word mark.
I have obsidian ring.
I control you.
As you're saying it, it does spark another thought. And I have had this thought in the back of my mind for a while. In most fantasy books, even the most baddie bad, a lot of the times, there is a small human moral element to them, right? And The king seems so desensitized. He seems so uncaring about anyone and everything. And I feel like that's especially evident when he puts the Wordstone collar on Dorian in this stretch of chapters. His lack of caring about Dorian seems so inhuman to me that it does call into question, is the king really still in control? Now, of course, I think the king is so awful. It would not surprise me for the king to be like, this behavior is unacceptable. I'm going to put you in the dungeon until you learn manners and control and respect or whatever. But to literally damn your own son and heir to be inhabited by a Valg, I'm not saying the king can't be that bad, but maybe he is being influenced by a Valg to go to that kind of extreme measures. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
He's too detached from his own son.
Yeah, I mean, literally in every fantasy book, show, movie, whatever, anything that involves like a hierarchy with kings and princes, queens, princesses, the latter, they are so concerned with their heirs and continuing the lineage and stuff. For the king to just be like, okay, bye, Dorian, here you go, peace, we'll let all the magic in your soul be sucked out of you. I don't know. You're right. It is very cold, very uncaring, very not like a human. That's for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, okay. This obviously was an information download chapter, so we are not done with the reveals yet. Maeve doesn't have a sure answer as to why Selena's mark glowed when she was fighting Cain, but she does tell her, perhaps your blood merely recognized the presence of the Valg and was trying to tell you something. Perhaps it meant nothing. Selena speculates this is not the case, and I agree. Honestly, I feel that this symbol is some sort of signal to the Valg. It for sure means something to them beyond just being born of a bastard lineage. It's something everybody has honed in on very specifically.
Oh, I strongly agree. The information we are getting right now is not the end of the conversation about this mark. I refuse. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier too, but ain't no way.
So the next thing is that the fire and light can kill the Valg princes, but in a land without magic, cutting off their heads to sever the collar would likely work as well. And again, we've talked about this, but even if they sever the head, it seems to mean that that's only going to kill the mortal body. So I guess we'll see how that works if Selena actually does that to anybody in Aurelia. Last but not least, we learn that the King of Aderlin is limited to opening the portals for brief periods of time to let in a prince or two. But if he had all three, he could open the portal, quote unquote, at will, and summon all the Valg armies to be led by the princes in their mortal bodies. Furthermore, with all three keys, he might not need to rely on magically gifted hosts for the Valg. His control would be absolute, and he would not need living hosts, only bodies, aka he could raise the dead. Potentially, I know.
Internal and external screaming, both.
This is definitely like the big, big bad, as in the worst possible thing the king could do if he gets all three keys, raising a huge ass army of dead Valg infected bodies and invading other continents and worlds. I put brain exploding emoji.
That sounds about right.
The only small comfort is that the king does not yet have all three keys.
I feel like yet is doing a lot of work there. It's carrying the team right now. But all this information is very upsetting. Although I'm not entirely surprised, but it still doesn't feel good. But it did prompt a question for me that I have for you. And that is, through this conversation, did it seem a little suspicious to you that Maeve did not seem even a little concerned, worried, alarmed, etc. by this discussion information? If the king actually possessed that kind of power, to me, it would seem that he could easily overrun Dornell, kill Maeve. He would basically be unstoppable. So why doesn't Maeve seem more upset by this?
Yeah, I've had a similar question. Everything about the scenario is so weird because she actually kept her promise and told Selena some information, although we speculate it's not the full truth of everything. But she's just hanging out in Dornell, doesn't care. he's already coming to Wendelin. He already sent an army over. So who's to say he's not going to come and attack you unless you guys have like some kind of alliance or something that nobody knows about. And he just knows not to fuck with you and you won't fuck with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So think about this, right? What did we just learn about Maeve? She was literally so scared of Brandon's power and the potential for his heirs to come back. She moved her city, built it in stone around water. And now you're telling me that the king of Aderlin could possibly raise an army of the dead that would basically be unstoppable. And she's like, well, yeah, it's fine. I'm not that worried about it. Something about that does not seem right. Maeve seems like the type to eliminate any threat that comes her way, even the potential of a threat. And Rowan basically says that to Celaena whenever they make the blood oath. He's like, she may not come after you right now, but she could tomorrow. And so it just strikes me as so odd that she is not concerned or worried or like, this is a huge problem. If he gets that, he could come for us. I just find that very odd.
I do too. The only other thing that I could think of is if Maeve is hiding something about her true power, which obviously is because we barely know anything about it.
Okay.
So maybe she is strong enough to rival the king, and so she's not worried about it. But then the question is, okay, well, how are you that strong? And what are you doing with all that power? It just raises more questions. As Celaena contemplates the doom she feels from the threat of the king and the Word Key's power, she feels a warming presence that is definitely Mala's presence, I think.
Yes.
The line in the book is a calming warmth wrapped around her as if someone had pulled her into an embrace, feminine, joyous, infinitely powerful. This doom has not yet come to pass, it seemed to whisper in her ear. There is still time. Do not succumb to fear yet. So my question is, if the power of fire and light that Brandon and his heirs possess is from Mala, how did this happen? And we brought this question up earlier, but this is the part where I actually had this thought. Did she just magically gift their line with power? And Maeve had said that Mala loved him fiercely. So lots of questions about how that came to be.
Yeah, I'm still leaning towards that he is a child of Mala and another Fae male. I just don't see how else he could have that kind of power. It's described so often that basically Brandon's power and Aelin's power are unprecedented. No one in the world has ever had power like that. And I'm like, that is the power of the gods, or like closer fractional power. Yeah.
Right.
Something's up.
Something's going on there. Celaena also wonders why Brandon had hidden the keys instead of put them back. And this is something we will talk more about when it gets addressed in the next chapter. And then the last thing we learn is that Maeve does not have any idea where the keys are, but she speculates the King of Aderlin has at least one, but more likely two. And this is something that we had already speculated based on how much power he had and what he was able to do. But this is just a piece of text that supports that idea formally. So
I mean, we definitely knew about the one from Elena's tomb, and then it was just a question about the volcano. But once we get that little story from Captain Jensen and Nola, I was like, oh, yeah, so he definitely has two word keys for sure. Something else that's happening in real time in this conversation is that Celaena thinks to herself, she realizes that Maeve had said the word taken. And I have to call myself out here because on my first read, I definitely did not catch when Maeve said the keys were taken from her. But thank God that Aelin was paying attention because I was not. I am also mad at myself because I remember listening to this part of the book when Aelin thinks stone and not a sign of wood, save for plants and furniture. And I remember hearing that and I was like, okay, this is obviously important, but why? And I was just like, why? I know it gets revealed almost immediately in this chapter, but I am so mad at myself for not figuring it out. Because you just know it. The sentence is so out of place and you're like, who cares? And you're like, wait, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I didn't get it. Not until it happened. And I was like, oh, and I'm just very mad at myself for not being a better reader.
No, honestly, when she was talking about the stone and stuff, I picked up on it too, because she mentioned all the stone like 3 times, just little comments about how everything was made of stone. And I was like, okay, the stone's important. And I almost was expecting it to end up being like word stone or something. Which would have been way worse, but I'm glad it wasn't that. Should have known, but here we are. I also would like to say that I hate Maeve for whipping Rowan. Just the cruel symbolism of that and what it means knowing Celaena's background I feel like also just makes it extra insidious. But I love that Selena decides to protect him with her flame. She's like, I'll protect you.
It's just so sad too, because you know that Maeve does that all the time. I mean, it's even described in the book. It's like doing a dance that he's done 1,000 times. It says like he knows how to pace himself. He knows what pain to expect. And the way it's described that he has dead eyes and the whole cadre just has dead eyes, like they're all just disassociating. And it is so sad. And obviously, Aelin could only do what she could do. But I'm really sad that she didn't free the rest of the cadre. Even though we don't really know them, I'm like, don't leave them in her clutches.
I'm sure that will hopefully be a side quest later on.
I hope so.
And then my last favorite thing was just the line where it said she knew the gold in her eyes had shifted to flame because when she looked at Maeve, the queen's face had gone bone white. And then Selena set the world on fire.
Yes. That last sentence. And she set the world on fire. I was like, yeah! I love that. It's so cool. Such a great visual.
I also think it's really interesting that with Selena's power, she can have the flame without actually burning people. She can control the temperature and stuff too, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which is so cool because how absolutely terrifying. Can you imagine if you were surrounded by flames that didn't burn, but they were like, do what I want or I will burn you alive? I'd be like, okay, whatever you want. Just let me know. Yep, we'll just, okay. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. So that ends chapter 59. Moving on to chapter 60. One of the first revelations Selena has is that Maeve's interest in her magic had purely been to learn how much Brandon's power she had. And this naturally leads to the question of why Maeve cares about Brandon's fire and light power specifically. What would she do with this knowledge? And what would she do about Selena? Also, is Maeve afraid of this power because it could destroy her too?
I would say yes. I mean, I think fire in general could probably kill most fae, but especially magical fire could definitely kill. I would say, honestly, as we're talking about it in real time, I feel like Maeve would only truly be scared of power that could rival her own. And that would seem to indicate to me that she knew that Brandon and potentially his heirs could have power that could rival hers. And we know how powerful she is. Well, I guess it's alluded to how powerful she is.
Right. Yeah, that was my sense as well. And then yet again, I am just surprised as fuck by something Selena realizes internally. Just like, where did this come from?
As always.
We learned that Brandon and Athril were friends who went to retrieve the keys to prevent Maeve from stealing them herself. Maeve had actually been the one to kill Athril. Brandon had then taken the keys and burned down Mala's temple so Maeve wouldn't find him. He had also left Goldrin in the lake monster's cave to honor him and to keep it away from Maeve. Obviously, this is like big red flag. Maeve is a baddie bad if Brandon doesn't trust her. We've said it so many times, but there's just something more to who Maeve is that is yet to be revealed, because my thought was that it's expected from somebody who is like a bad character wanting to take the keys. It's what the king did. And so I have to imagine there is something else about Maeve that we don't know yet, and about what she would do or what she could do if she had those keys as well. Like, there's obviously something Brandon knows that made him want to take the keys away and make sure Maeve never got her hands on them.
I just feel Maeve is so old, and I mean, she's smart, right? You got to give it to her. And it would not surprise me if she's been playing the long game for like 1,000 years, that she somehow predicted that someone might find the keys, and she's actually like waiting for the king to get all three or something before she makes her move. Or I have no evidence to support this, but I'm wondering if maybe Maeve and the king have a deal or they're working together. I don't know. The possibilities are endless, and I don't trust her. So we'll just have to wait and see. But my big question about this reveal is, how does Selena know that Athril and Brandon were friends?
Oh, yeah.
I get for the most part how she pieced together the stuff about Brandon through Emers's stories and everything. But what evidence or speculation would give her any knowledge at all about Athril, other than he was probably the man that Maeve had loved long ago, and likely the one that carved out the lake monster's eye just because she found the sword, etc. How would she know there was any connection to Brandon at all? How would she even know that their timelines of life crossed each other?
See, this is my frustration with not getting all of Selena's internal thoughts, because I feel like she'll suddenly have these like, oh, this, and this. But I was like, okay, girl, you never told us anything that you were thinking about prior to this. And now all of a sudden this comes to light. There must be a lot more that Selena knows about her family's history that she hasn't voiced yet to us. Because
that's fair.
Otherwise, how would she know that Brandon and Athel were friends if the only story about Maeve's past related to Athel that we've gotten is that Athel was Maeve's beloved and a great warrior, you know what I mean? But that's literally all we got. Brandon was not mentioned in that line whatsoever. And so the only way that you would have come to that conclusion is if you knew something about Brandon before that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I checked my ebook. Athel, the first time Athel's name is mentioned is like in this book at the very end, like the very first time he's introduced to us. There's no, she had heard a story long ago of Brandon and a close friend. There's nothing like that. Nothing. Exactly. No hint, no illusion.
Selena needs to tell us more about her thoughts, and because she's hiding some stuff too. Selena also pieces together that Brandon had left a key in the Amulet of Warmth to give them that extra ounce of power, not against ordinary enemies, but in case Maeve ever came for them. Perhaps he had not put the keys back in the gate because he wanted to be able to call upon their power should Maeve ever decide to install herself as mistress of all lands. So this still doesn't suffice as an explanation for me. Again, why didn't it protect them against the king's dark magic? Previously, I had speculated that there is a connection between Maeve and the dark magic of the king. And if that's correct, then I feel like it should have done something. Like, why did the amulet not like rise up against anything that happened? We know it protected Aelin when she fell in the river and guided her and kept her safe. And you had speculated that maybe that's because it's only the wearer is protected. But if it was really intended to help them against their enemies and stuff, something isn't adding up to me about why it didn't work. Probably in the grand scheme of things, I'm just pissed that it didn't. I'm like, you should have done something, and this freaking amulet did nothing. But obviously, if it had protected them, then we literally wouldn't have this series. So I guess it was like a necessary point of conflict.
I think for me, when I think about the third word key in the amulet, there's a lot of, well, on the one hand, this, but on the other, then doesn't that also mean this? And there's lots of contradictory thoughts and speculation that just don't add up. I'm sure it gets explained in a satisfactory way, but for me, unsatisfactory. I don't understand.
That's what I'm saying.
I just keep going back to nobody knew it was in there. And I feel like you have to know about the word key to be able to access its power. But then I'm like, how did it save Selena? I don't know. I just, we need
too many
know
questions.
More. Too many questions.
Not enough answers. But yeah, that was one of my other points too, is that what is the trigger for the Amulet of Warren's power? And ultimately, how is it activated? How do you use it? My other thought that I had from this piece of information about running from Maeve and everything is I don't understand Brandon's fear of Maeve. She is very powerful, obviously, but apparently so is Brandon. His reasoning for keeping the word gate open isn't sufficing because we saw that Selena's fire scared the shit out of Maeve, which means she would have been scared of Brandon as well. She literally constructed her city of stone and surrounded it with water to try and protect herself. And I think there's some other reason for why Brandon kept the gates open. Maybe he wanted to have an escape option for himself, or maybe he wanted to ensure that if all the Valg entered into Aurelia, then they wouldn't get stuck there, as in he needed an insurance policy to know he could send them back into their realm if needed. I don't know. I'm just wondering if he had the keys, or I guess maybe if he didn't know how to put them back. But I was like, Brandon, you've been around. Somebody knows something, I'm sure, about it. And I feel like there's a very intentional reason for why he chose not to try to put them back.
My first thought is maybe he actually couldn't or didn't know how. Maybe he really couldn't put them back. The second is maybe this is a genuine fear here that he wants to be able to access their power in case Maeve came. But that just doesn't quite align. There's lots of, this makes logical sense, but it doesn't quite align with other elements of the story that we've gotten. I just feel like Brandon is so, I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating because literally we've never even met Brandon. But I feel like Brandon is such a good character that he recognized how devastating and awful the word keys could be, that he would never risk leaving them where anyone could ever find them.
Right.
Unless it was for a very, very good reason or if he didn't have a choice. And that kind of leads me back to, I just don't think he knew how to put them back in the gate.
Could be. Yeah.
Again, so many questions. And also, where the fuck is Brandon and what is he doing? I'm sorry, this is starting to become a thing for me. Where is he and what is he doing? My only excuse for him could be that he is in Aurelia and he's trapped in his animal form. Or he's dead. But if he was dead, I feel like we would know that. I feel like that would be
like a really big, well-known death, like high-profile death.
Yes. And the counter evidence to that is when Maeve first meets Selena at the beginning of this book, she says, why is it the Lord of the North or this great stag or whatever, something like that told me 2 years ago about a girl with Ash River eyes in a wagon on the way to Endovir. Or there's some description like that. I would need to go back and look it up.
I remember that.
But yeah, and so that to me implies Brandon is alive and also that somehow he's giving Maeve information. I don't... why would he give him... What if Maeve has him trapped? Why would Brandon give Maeve information about Aelin?
Oh, you're thinking Maeve actually has Brandon and she has him trapped somehow?
Maybe. I'm going to have to go back and read that. Put a pin in that, guys, and we'll come back to that because now I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm confused too.
Do not come to our podcast for answers. You will only get more questions.
Basically. But I would also like to point out, though, on the plus side, how controlled and skilled Selena is at this point. She lit up the entire city with her flame, but kept the flames cool so that they wouldn't hurt or actually burn anyone. And she thinks the power wasn't in might or skill, it was in the control. The power lay in controlling herself. She'd known all along how vast and deadly her fire was, and a few months ago she would have killed and sacrificed and slaughtered anyone. But that hadn't been strength. It had been the rage and grief of a broken, crumbling person. She understood now what her mother had meant when she had patted her heart that night she'd given her the amulet. When Selena and Maeve argue over Rowan's release, she sends a false vision to Maeve to scare her. The vision that she sends is what Narok had sent her during the Valg battle scene. And the quote was, "This was not a true set in stone, but it was a potential future that she knew would scare Maeve enough to concede to her demands for now." We also learned through Aelin's thoughts that this vision had been shown to her, not to taunt her, but as a warning of what might become if she did indeed find the keys and choose to keep them. The vision basically shows Aelin back in power thanks to the keys she'd attained and the wonderful kingdom she had built. And there was a quote that said she was more than human, more than queen, beloved, immortal, blessed. Aelin of the Wildfire. Aelin Fireheart, Aelin Lightbringer. She smiled at the crowd, at her people, at her world. So ripe for the taking. So at first I was like reading about that vision and that didn't really deter me from the possibility of it. I was like, oh, that's nice for Aelin.
Lorraine, you're missing the point.
I know. But the real lesson is that no one should have that much absolute power. The keys belong in the word gate, not under the control of a single person. And I guess this scares Maeve because she doesn't want to see someone more powerful than her, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that is very well said. The second part, not the first part, was not a good choice. Okay. I think the language that is used to describe that vision is meant to be foreboding, especially when she says she smiled at the crowd, at her people, at her world, so ripe for the taking. And that is really ominous phrasing, especially when you think about what kind of power the word keys can give when you actually wield them. I think this is very, very much intended to be a warning for Aelin. And this is also supported by the text that reads, she did not see that vision had been given to Selena, not to taunt her, but as a warning of what she might become if she did indeed find the keys and keep them. And so I think her own thought and description here is meant to also imply to us that it's meant to be a warning for Aelin that anybody, even she, is susceptible to being drunk on the power that the keys can give. And it's really easy when you have that much power in your hand to say, well, I would use it for good. I wouldn't do bad things. But once you open that door down the line, let's just say 100 years from now, there's not a threat. And she's like, well, for the good of my people, I will use the keys to eliminate the threat. And then it's a very slippery slope. And I think that is what the vision is meant to imply.
I agree.
I also thought it was interesting that the quote continued on to say, a gift from the man Narok had been. We discussed this in the last episode, and I feel this pretty solidly confirms that the vision was given as a gift to Aelin from the mortal man that Narok had possessed, and appreciation for releasing him from the prison of being possessed by a Valg. I know we debated that a little bit, and I think this pretty much confirms and wraps up that thought.
Probably because he had now experienced, I'm sure coming from somebody who has been under the influence of this Valg and really understands what that feels like and the power that comes from that, he was probably like, be careful.
Yeah, let me try to save you from a terrible fate.
Yeah. Exactly. The last important thing from this chapter is Rowan being freed from his blood oath to Maeve.
Woo! Before we get into this, I just have to say this was a great scene and I loved it. But this is a big but, okay? This was kind of underwhelming to me. Okay.
Yep.
Maybe underwhelming isn't the right word necessarily, but we could not shut up about this damn blood oath and questioning how the fuck. I just whispered because I think my kids are outside the door, but how the fuck we were going to get Rowan out of it. Okay. This was a question that plagued me all throughout this book. I honestly thought this was going to be such a huge problem and plot line. And then it was just like, I'll trade you for him. And you're like, okay. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy, but I think I let myself down because I was making a bigger thing than it needed to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I thought it was going to be this huge plot issue. And then it was just easily figured out. So much for that being like a big side quest. All she had to do was trade a ring.
Just like, oh. And to my knowledge, it's not even magical. It's literally just a gold band.
Yeah, I have questions about that. So actually, speaking of it, is this ring important to Maeve simply because of its sentimental value? Or is there something else going on with it? I just felt it was a little weird that Maeve would kill Athril for power, but then mourn over him and want the ring back purely because she loved him. Clearly, she didn't love him that much, or she wouldn't have killed him. Which then makes me question if there is something else about that ring that makes Maeve want it, you know?
Well, to be fair, we don't really truly know the whole story of how everything went down. We get Aelin's suspected version of events. I honestly do actually think it's because she loved him. It does have the sentimental value. I don't know why, but my gut says there's nothing special about it. It's just simply because she missed him. Now, this is a crazy thought, and I have absolutely no evidence to support this at all, but I'm just going to throw it out here. I'm pulling a Lorraine, okay? It's time for a batshit crazy thought. What if Maeve wants to try to resurrect him or bring him back or something, and one of the ways she has to do it is she must have a personal object of Athril's, but because it was so long ago, nothing survived of Athril's, and this ring was the last thing that existed of him, and that's why she wants it, because she wants to do some kind of magic or something with it. I know it's a little off the wall, but I will say you're right. It does seem odd that she was quite literally willing to break a blood oath with Rowan, a very, 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 very powerful fae, for a plain gold band. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're probably right. There's probably something more to it.
It could be nothing. It really could just be that it's sentimental to her. In general, I was like, that seems a little bit weird to me because you killed him.
Right, girl, you killed him. You killed him dead.
You killed him for some power. And now you're like, oh, just kidding. I loved him. Give me that ring because it's valuable to me. Like, no.
Okay,
like,
fair enough. It does not compute.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that Rowan turns around immediately and makes a blood oath to Selena instead. So as soon as he's freed, he's like, we gotta recommit now so that Maeve doesn't hurt you later. I did love that Selena refuses at first because she doesn't want to see him yield his entire life to her after literally just being freed from this situation to somebody else. But In this exchange, they have another mind-to-mind conversation. And obviously, this is important that the conversation is happening before. Okay, this is like another example of them doing this, but this mind-to-mind speak has been happening before they were Karanom, and then also now before he actually took the blood oath to her.
Yes.
I don't think it's very commonplace for this ability to exist between Fae or Demi-Fae or anything. So I do think it's pretty unique. And I am going to hold on to this little scrap of evidence until SJM writes in text explicitly stating that they are not mates.
All I wrote was, well, it is in italics, and you know what that means. ... When shit's in italics, it's always something funky. Okay? Always. Always.
Yep. I will say, this whole blood oath situation does throw a little wrench in my reading plans because it just muddies the water. How am I supposed to find evidence to support my mate theory when Rowan is literally obligated to do everything for her from here on out?
I just wrote Addison cackles because absolutely. I should do my witch laugh. Maybe I'll record it later and throw it in there. I do a mean witch laugh, but I'm too self-conscious to do it when Lorraine's on the camera. I can't. I'm too self-conscious.
We'll have a little witch laugh contest after this.
All right. I guarantee mine is better.
Probably.
Yeah, I scare my children with my witch laugh.
Oh, you should join the Iron Teeth Witches.
I absolutely could. With this witch laugh, I could. For no other reason. I'm not physically fit enough or mean enough or scary enough or tough enough. I meet none of the requirements other than the witch laugh.
Addison gives a mean cackle.
I do. I really do.
Okay. And then the third thing from this event is that she also feels that strange feminine warmth wrap around her again and ensure her that this was the right decision. And I really am beginning to wonder more and more about Mala's role in Aelin's life. Is she just a guiding goddess, or will she protect Aelin in a bigger way somehow? Mala is very drawn to Aelin. Obviously, Aelin's power comes from Mala some way, somehow. And so I'm just wondering how this connection and influence will develop as the series continues.
I agree. I know we said this early in the episode, but Mala is mentioned so much in this last stretch of chapters that it cannot be a coincidence. There has to be more to that. I also love that in this section of the chapter, the way it's described that the feminine warmth or presence is as if assuring her it was all right to want this badly enough that it hurt, telling her that she could trust the prince, and more than that, more than anything, she could trust herself. I think this is really indicative of Celaena's journey, that she's scared she can't trust herself and her own judgment. And I like that she got the reassurance that she needed to trust herself. Rowan truly is a ride or die. He really is. I hate to say it. And maybe, just maybe, I like him just a little. Just a tiny little bit, okay? So we'll see. But now we'll talk about it when we get there too. But I don't think he's going to be in Queen of Shadows. So I'm like, don't get me started. Don't get me started. I have thoughts about this.
I know. When she left him again, I was like, no, keep him as a little pet hawk. It's fine.
Like a Lorraine, keeping men as pets. Okay, Maeve. That seems like a very Maeve thing to do.
Damn. Maybe I have a little bit of Maeve in me. Another minor detail that I picked up on was when Celaena and Rowan leave Maeve's palace and she notes that a white barn owl was flapping off into the moonlit night. And way back in the beginning of the book, when they first meet with Maeve, it's noted that there was a barn owl sitting behind her. And again, I'm just like, who is this barn owl?
In the very first episode of Heir of Fire, we speculated that the owl was someone important or someone she was holding prisoner in their animal form. Maybe Mab, maybe Mora. We really have no evidence at this point, but I feel it in my bones. That fucking owl is important, and it is going to come up again. And I don't know why. This is a dumb hill, but I'm going to die on it. I will not let go of that stupid owl. And if it never gets mentioned again for the rest of the series, I'm going to be angry.
One day we're going to listen to all of our episodes from the very beginning, and we're going to be like, wow, we really tried to die on a hill, and we did die on that hill because nothing ever happened. There was no redemption from those deaths.
still get secondhand embarrassment when I was like, oh, for sure, Dorian's parents ain't his parents. Why he got them blue eyes? I'm going to die on that hill. And I remember we just started the podcast. We posted that reel and someone was like, that's not the reason. That is not the hill to die on. And I was like,
oops. It's okay. I've had so many of those, but it's funny. So
I have started to think about going back and listening to the beginning just for fun, like listening to the book and the podcast, but I can't. I can't go backwards. I can only go forward. Okay, I can't do it.
All right, to get back on track, our final point for this chapter is that I Love Selena gets her own tattoo in the Old Fae language, detailing the story of her beloved dead, and she sings songs of Terrasen the whole time while Rowan marks out the story. And the specific quote was 3 lines of text pulled over her 3 largest scars. The story of her love and loss now written on her. 1 line for her parents and uncle, 1 line for Lady Marian, 1 line for her court and her people. On the smaller, shorter scars were the stories of Nehemia and Sam, her beloved dead.
All I wrote is, damn it, Addison is crying again. I did cry. I won't cry in the episode. I'm okay. I feel strong enough. But when I was reading it, it was very touching. It was very moving. And again, I know I mentioned last episode, the writing in the last set of chapters was really excellent. But I feel like this was another part of this chapter that in particular I thought was really beautiful and really moving.
Yeah. So that ends at chapter 60, moving on to chapter 61. So this is a chapter where we check back in the witches. And first off, it's about damn time we check back in with them.
Thank you.
It's been ages since we heard anything about them. But as far as the timeline goes, the last time we had an update from them was several weeks ago. I guess that makes sense. But I was like, man, it's nice to be with them again.
It is. And before we get into the analysis of this chapter, I wanted to give a quick little comprehensive guide to who the 13 are based on the information we've gotten so far in the book. And obviously we know the 13 is Manon's coven. So if you don't know that, I don't know what you're doing here. But there's Manon, duh, she's the leader. Okay. There's Astrid, she's the second in command. And then Sorrel is the third. Manon, Astrid, and Sorrel are the witches that we get the most information about. We get the most page time with them. I have a feeling that trend will continue, but we'll see. Then there's Vesta, who she kind of seems like the unofficial 4th in line in terms of like rank, I guess. And then there are the Shadows, Edda and Briar. There are the demon twins, Phaelin and Fallon. And then there's Linnea, who also goes by Lynn. And that's basically the only thing we know about her from this book, is that if anyone called her by her full name, she would rip their throat out. She does not like to be called Linnea, only Lynn. And then there's 4 characters that it's described in this chapter, the formation that they're in, but this is the first time that they've ever been mentioned. And that is Imogen, Kaya, Thea, and Ghislaine. I don't actually know. Ghislaine. I don't know. It's Ghislaine. I actually don't remember how to say it. Whoopsie. But yeah, so those are the members of the 13. And we really don't know a lot about them. I think in Queen of Shadows, especially knowing what we know about them going to Morath and stuff, the world of witches is going to condense down to really just what the 13 is up to, probably for most of the book. And so we'll probably get a lot more interaction with all of the members of the 13.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you for compiling all of that.
Happy to.
So the first note is that the whole War Games literally, well, this is not super important, but it reminded me of the War Games in Fourth Wing because they had to go fetch an egg and everything.
Same. And then the other thing that I wanted to add about the War Games is Astrid, not the most badass bitch. I knew from the very start I was going to like her. From the very freaking beginning, I was like, Astrid is cool as hell, okay? I love Astrid. And that running leap she did from her wyvern, I was like, damn, that's cool. I desperately want them to make a television series about Thunderglass just so I can see this stuff with the witches because they're so cool.
Oh my gosh. If they do ever make a TOG series, they could do a whole spinoff just about the witches, I think. And
oh my God, you're so right. Yes, absolutely.
I do really love Astrid, though. She's so loyal. She's very fearless. She's like always there to support Manon. And speaking of Asherin being super cool, I've just felt like Manon and her entire 13 are just so freaking cool. And they are handing and they're handing literally everyone their asses. And I also love that Abraxos seems to be having a lot of fun during this game because he's like swiping his wing at Astron's wyvern, and it said that he does this in an almost flirtatious gesture, and I was like, oh,
that was cute. Yeah, I know. It really was.
But the more analysis-based things that I noticed was I did find the line about Petra waiting for just the right time to be kind of interesting. It said, led by Petra herself on her mount, Keely, she was nearly free-falling for the nest, which had been left wide open while the Blackbeaks and the Yellowlegs fought. She'd been waiting for this, like a fox in its hole. And I know we've sort of come to the conclusion that Petra and the Bluebloods seem to want to ally with the Blackbeaks, but the fact that she called her a fox feels a little bit weird, although it could just, obviously be to demonstrate that Petra was clever and sneaky, and they are playing a war game, I guess. So
yeah, I did not take it like that at all. I literally just took it as descriptive language. She was just very clever to use Manon's 13 as a distraction so she could get the egg. That's how I took it. Right. I don't know why. I implicitly trust Petra and like her. I know my previous analysis was very counterintuitive that I was like, what if Petra and Iskra were conniving and planning behind Manon's back? I had to point that out because it was a possibility, but I don't know why. I just really trust Petra. I like her.
I think that's why I keep questioning it, because
ever since I brought that up, I know, but it made sense. It was a total possibility, so I had to say it, but I still don't think that's really what was going down. But I know, I'm sorry for giving you an inherent mistrust of her. I started something, and I apologize.
I need to get over it. But yeah, no, I guess in combination with the fact that then Petra literally gets attacked by Iskra, which is obviously leagues above in terms of sketchiness.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, probably not a thing. Now, this leads us to the bigger event, of course. And that is the fact that Iskra attacks Petra with the intent to kill, despite the rules explicitly stating that they could not kill or maim each other. And it's noted that Abraxos was the first to stop and refused to continue with their mission, instead urging Manon to go help Keely and Petra. We know that Petra and Keely had come down to the wyvern stalls to offer Abraxos meat while he recovered, and Petra had made the comments about communicating with Keely, who had told her to give Abraxos the goat meat. There is something unique for sure about Keely and Abraxos' wyverns. It doesn't seem like we're going to get the full story about it because things are mentioned in passing, but there's never a deep dive in this. Also, I do feel like the matrons are hiding something, but in general, I felt like this whole event just adds to our suspicions that something weird is going on amongst the witches, since Iskra is purposely trying to kill Petra and was successful in killing Keely. The Yellowlegs are for sure up to some shady shit, and I want to know what and why.
The Yellowlegs in particular, for sure. There's something about the Yellowlegs I inherently mistrust. I don't think they have the best interest of all witches. I think they have their best interest. I think Iskra's behavior here, it sort of solidifies that thought for me.
In general, at this point in time, the Yellowlegs are very much up to something. We just don't know what or why, but they are hell-bent on power, at least. To continue with the sequence, once Petra falls, there's also a line that says, Manon didn't know how she gave the command, but that scream made her lean in. Abraxos dove, a shooting star with his glistening wings. And this line continues to add to this unique relationship that Abraxos and Manon have. It's more than obvious that there is some line of communication that exists between them. We just don't have enough information about what it is. And I don't think Manon really understands what it is either.
Oh, I completely agree. I think that bond is going to continue to get explored and developed in Queen of Shadows. For me, when I read that quote, it's not just the scream, but it's the way that it's described as, but that scream, the mother scream she'd never heard before, made her lean in. And I feel like this description really just plays into the idea that we've discussed, that Manon does have a heart and she does feel. Otherwise, why would she be moved by the scream of a mother afraid of losing her daughter? And I feel like this is also further highlighted when Manon thinks. Manon told herself it was for an alliance, told herself it was for show, but all she could see was the unconditional love in that dying wyvern's eyes as she unbuckled her harness, stood from the saddle, and leapt off Abraxos. And I'm like,
Mhm.
girl, you're really hung up on the unconditional love part. And one, that tells me you want it. You want unconditional love. And two, Manon has a heart. Okay. This is a hill I feel comfortable dying on. Manon has a heart.
Yes, and I think the debate is still out about whether Manon has a physical heart, but symbolically speaking, she for sure does, as she selflessly rescues Petra and notices the set unconditional love that Keely and Petra had for each other. She also seems to have that same type of love with Abraxos. And so Manon has yet to call it that because I really just don't think she knows what it is because she's never been taught. And that's something that comes up in the next chapter with the Kraken Witch they captured, which I found to be very interesting.
Oh, I know. I can't wait to talk about that.
Speaking of Manon's heart, that ends chapter 61, moving into chapter 62. So initially, I think it's still very wild to me that Granny Blackbeak thinks it was weak that Manon saved Petra and punishes her for it, despite the fact the Blackbeaks literally won the war games. Like, this bitch needs to retire. Okay, it's time for her to go.
Especially when you could easily construe that as a power play to make an alliance with the Blue Bloods. Like, oh, they'll owe us a favor. They'll be indebted to us. I get to a certain extent where she's like, you do not sacrifice victory to help somebody. But politically speaking, that was not a bad idea.
I don't think so either. And I love that Manon, despite the punishment, didn't regret what she did either. She thinks some part of her, perhaps a weak, undisciplined part, did not regret ensuring the animal sacrifice had not been in vain.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like this continues to speak to the idea that Manon is not cruel or heartless. And I know we're going to probably beat that to death in this podcast until something is actually revealed to that effect. But I also officially have decided to add Granny Blackbeak to this ever-growing list of actual baddie bads in the series. I feel like her interactions have really transitioned from the beginning of the book of just really tough love, like really tough love, to just flat out abusive and cruel. I think back to this conversation that she had with Manon in the beginning where she's telling her, I would not be pleased if I had to find a new heir. But it's kind of said with like, because I love you and I miss you and I would not want you to die because it would be inconvenient for me. You know, like that's how it kind of came across. But now as the story has progressed, she's just abusive. She's just hitting her and screaming at her all the time. And so I don't think she's up there with the king or Maeve. But I am actually starting to suspect that besides being just an awful person in general, she is also up to something more nefarious. And I think you had a similar thought. So we'll discuss it when we get there. But fuck Arabin Hamel, fuck the king, fuck Maeve, fuck Granny Blackbeak. Okay. The four of them. The list of my enemies keeps growing.
To be continued, because I feel like we're definitely going to meet more people that we don't like.
No, how many more baddie bads can there be out there?
There's always an infinite number of baddie bad that then need to be defeated by the goody goods. So
I think we've taken it too far.
Okay. When Manon enters the ceremony room where the witches were holding their own celebration, she notes the following. The blue blood matron smiled as Manon pressed 2 fingers to her brow. The yellow legs matron did nothing, but her grandmother, seated in the center, smiled faintly, a snake's smile. And the snake's smile part was a bit of foreshadowing for Granny Blackbeak's announcement. I think that Manon would kill the Kraken Witch, thereby granting her the gift of a new red cloak. But the way that this chapter read, there's a lot of stuff that, has raised my flags about Granny over here.
I also just felt like it's just generic foreshadowing that she isn't trustworthy. Anytime someone's described like a snake, usually that means betrayer or untrustworthy. I also wanted to highlight this thought that Manon has. The Kraken had cursed them, made them external exiles. They deserved to die, each and every one of them. But it was not her voice that said those things in her head. No, for some reason, it was her grandmother's. And that really stood out to me. I strongly believe this alludes to the idea that the matrons are not being forthcoming about what really started the witch wars and why. They hate the Krakens. And of course, this is also strongly alluded to in the conversation that the Kraken Witch and Manon have. I just feel like there is more to the backstory of the witch wars I know I speculated on that a while back, just about the curse and how everything played out. And the Krakens had ruled for so long. And then all of a sudden the Iron Teeth started the wars. I just feel like there's a lot more to the Witch Wars and the dynamics between the Krakens and the Iron Teeth that has yet to be revealed. And I'm hoping we're going to get more about that in Queen of Shadows.
I agree that there's something about what the matrons are doing that suggests they are hiding something. I don't know what it is yet, but something for sure. Another thing that I found interesting is that the Kraken Witch spills blue blood on the floor, but she goes on to tell Manon, this is a reminder of what they made you to be. They made you this way. And this tells us that this was just another test from Granny Blackbeak to see how worthy Manon is, and it was meant to renew cruelty and a thirst for blood in Manon, because Granny could sense that Manon had been developing a quote-unquote heart, and she was getting kind of soft, empathetic, if you will.
How dare she?
She also goes on to say, our greatest truth that we keep from you, it is not where we hide or how to break your curse. You have known all this time how to break it. You have known for 500 years that your salvation lies in your hands alone. No, our great secret is that we pity you. And then she continues to say, we pity you, each and every one of you, for what you do to your children. They are not born evil. That is why you are here tonight, Manon, because of the threat you pose to that monster you call grandmother. The threat you posed when you chose mercy and saved your rival's life. They have made you into monsters, made Manon, and we feel sorry for you.
Woo! If that ain't a big reveal.
So this definitely makes it clear that Manon is the key to breaking the witch curse. And there is definitely going to be continued tension between Granny and Manon, because Manon can feel that the Kraken is right, but she just can't disobey right now. I was wondering if there's a little bit more to the fact that made is italicized multiple times. And I wonder if there's different ways of interpreting that. So there's the made in the sense that they were made to be cruel because, you know, the witches wanted it that way. And so they just developed that as a personality trait among them. But I wonder if there is something to the fact that they were actually made specifically, like witches as a type of being were bred or created specifically for a type of reason. I don't know. It was just a side thought there.
I completely agree. I still stand by my analysis from a few episodes ago about the Kraken curse and how it's worded. I won't rehash the entire thing here because we've already talked about it. I'm sure we will talk about it again when it gets closer to the time of the curse actually being broken. But I think this confirms that it is Manon's fate to usher in a new era for the witches, specifically not under the Iron Teeth banner. I think she is going to break down some witch structures here and build them anew. I really do.
Yep, I totally agree. Outside of the book plot, I did like that this brings up a theme of nature versus nurture. It seems clear that the ruthlessness and cruelty is taught amongst the Iron Teeth witches, but what would they be like if they'd grown up or had been taught differently from that? I do wonder what Granny Blackbeak's angle is, though. Does she want to keep the witches separated so that the Blackbeaks can get the crown? Or just why does Granny want Manon to stay so cruel and vicious? I guess that's the ultimate question, is what are the matrons doing? What's Granny's plan?
What purpose does it serve for them to be that way? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Later that night, Manon flies out to a plateau on the peak of the Rune Mountains. There, she contemplates what the Kraken had said, and I really love that she contemplates the love that she had seen between Keely and Petra, and then her gratitude for Abraxos lounging beside her, sniffing the flowers. She thinks, a strange feeling, that gratitude for his existence. Then there was that other strange feeling that pushed and pulsed at her, making her replay the scene in the mess hall again and again. She regretted not knowing the Kraken's name. She regretted not knowing who the new cloak on her shoulders had belonged to, where she had come from, how she had lived. And that now ends chapter 62.
Ooh, I loved that Kraken chapter. I just want to know more about the witches.
I know, they're such an interesting group. We don't get enough information about them. So moving on to chapter 63. So this is where we check back in with Chaol and Aedion and Rifthold and everything. And there is a lot that happens in these next two chapters.
Yeah. Not good, guys. I mean, you guys already know that, but still, it's not good.
So Chaol is still unsure of whether it was time to tell Aedion what they had learned about the king's spell and how to break it. And then he also goes on to think about everything Selena had done in Wendelin and the state of Aurelia when she returned. He thinks part of him could still not fathom what she'd done to Narog. He could not accept that part of her, so bloodthirsty and unyielding. Even as Selena, it had been hard to swallow at times, and he had tried to look past it. But as Aelin, he'd known since the moment he figured out who she was that while Selena would always pick him, Aelin would not, and it would not be Selena Sardathian who returned to this continent.
I didn't like this.
I know. It's basically everything that we've concluded and discussed many times already. Chaol is afraid of the change and knows that Selena will no longer be Selena when she returns. I guess we need to see what Selena ultimately does when she comes back. But I guess Chaol will need to see for himself how Selena has changed in order to accept her. I will say, though, that if this doubt continues, I can see myself getting tired of it. But I also have to remind myself that Chaol knows nothing about Selena and what she's learned and how she's changed over the last several months. He only knows that she hates the King of Adarlan a lot and plans to get her revenge at some point.
That's a really good point that she has changed so foundationally. And Chaol really has no idea. I mean, he put the girl he loved on a boat to save her. She disappeared. And then he hears from across the sea that she's burning the king's generals down. I can get by that would be a little discombobulating for him. I really like this quote because I think it really sums up kind of the core fracture in Chaol and Selena's relationship is that he and Selena had a relationship, not he and Aelin. And she will never be Selena again. She'll never be that person again. She'll always be Aelin, which for us, we're like, yeah, because that's her true self, right? That's who she really is. And she's embracing it. And we love that for her. But there's just no future where Chaol and Aelin can be together. It was always going to have to be Chaol and Selena, and that future's gone. And so I am sad. I am happy that Chaol is coming to terms with that. I think they both are, right? We know when Aelin takes off the ring, the amethyst ring, but I am dying for their first time they see each other. You know, like when you break up with a guy and you go out for the first time, when you run into each other and there's like that. You see them and you're like, oh my God. And it just feels so dramatic. And I don't know. I'm like a little worried I'm going to get secondhand embarrassment from that interaction, but I really want to see it.
I bet it's going to be awkward. But I think foundationally they do still love each other. It's just no longer a romantic love, but they do have a desire to care about each other and like ensure that the other person is okay. So
I think it's one of those loves in a different life, in a different time. If they could just be a boy and a girl. If they could just be a boy and a girl, then it could happen. But he was captain of the guard and she was Aelin, the queen of Terrasen, and it was just never going to work out.
Well said. Now, I did find it kind of odd that when Aedion asked if he wants him to tell Selena anything, Chaol says, tell her that I had nothing to do with you. Tell her you barely spoke to me or Dorian. Tell her I am fine in Aniel and that we are all safe. I don't know if I was just misreading that, but I was a little bit confused because why didn't he want to be associated with Aedion? Is it because Selena's going to assume Aedion had done awful things over the last 10 years and then he doesn't want to be associated with that and then therefore subject to scrutiny? I don't know. I don't think I was interpreting that line correctly. So hopefully you have some insight you can offer me.
I got you. Yeah. I read that and I was like, oh, Lorraine, you're so confused, my sweet summer child. So I think what Chaol is trying to convey, I think it's a couple of things, right? The first thing is that Chaol is trying to emotionally separate himself from Selena, Aelin. I'm going to go with Selena here because that's what Chaol called her. I think it's also Chaol trying to sever the connection that they have. And he knows that it will be a lot harder for both he and Selena to move on if she knows how hard he was working on her behalf against the King of Adarlan. I think it's a way for them to both sort of protect themselves and insulate themselves from each other because they both still love each other, but deep down, they both know they're not meant to be. And so I think it's a way for him to put some distance in between them. But of course, now he ain't going to Aniel, and I feel like they're going to end up having to work together. in Queen of
Oh, yeah,
Shadows.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, it didn't really work out, did it?
Yeah, I guess I was just confused as to why he wouldn't want her to know that he had been working on her behalf. But yeah, everything that you said makes sense and it's computing now.
Okay, the math is mathing. Good.
Yeah. So later on, we check in with Sorscha and Dorian, and she has a thought that I wanted to know. It says, if magic was freed, it would be chaos. People might go as mad from its sudden return as they'd gone from its departure. She didn't want to think what the king would do next. And this is actually a really good point that I hadn't considered. After so long, I would imagine many people would need training and time to adjust to magic again, in the same way that Selena had to learn to control her power in Gwendolyn. And I would imagine that it would be very chaotic and destructive to have a bunch of uncontrolled magical beings like letting their magic loose because they couldn't help it, you know?
Oh,
So,
and you have to imagine at this point, there have been a lot of children born that have magic who would have no idea because they were born in a world without it. So all of a sudden,
right.
if it's allowed to flow, you might have all these 10-year-olds who are like setting things on fire or like
mini Aelins running around.
Oh my God. I never thought about that. You're totally right. My
Sorscha
kid
brought it up. And I was like, oh, girl, that's a good point.
That would definitely be my oldest. She would definitely have magic of some sort. I guarantee it. In a different universe, when we release magic in this world, she would have some kind of crazy magic. I know she would. And for good, though. She would, not like an evil, scary way. I mean, like in a good way. Really,
what about
that's what was
the second one?
I don't know about her. That might be like a little mini Maeve, honestly.
Second child syndrome. You know, I was the second child, so I can relate.
No surprise there. No surprise. I was the oldest, in case you guys can't tell.
Oh, yeah. Send us a text. Can you tell that Addison is the oldest and Lauren is the youngest?
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely, they can. It just made me think about last night where I was like, I made us another schedule. And you were like, Addison, you're always making us schedules. I'm like, I know. And then after like 3 days, they get tossed to the wind. But I just enjoy the process, okay? Anyway. When Dorian and Sorscha are laying in bed, Sorscha is contemplating everything that has happened with Dorian. And I was cringing on my reread because she is just having all these thoughts about how she knows deep down that she would have to let Dorian go for the greater good and that he would need a true queen. And obviously, that's just not going to be her. I just want to scream and shake her and tell her to run because I'm like, baby girl, it ain't ever going to come to that because you'll be dead long before it comes to that. And I was just like, no, Sorscha, you should have left when Dorian told you.
I know. Every time somebody tells you to run and we're like, no. And we're like, all right, something bad is going to happen.
You're like, bye.
They didn't run.
It sealed your fate.
Yep. But anyways, dude, as soon as the king summoned them with the secret guards, that was another key that shit is about to go down.
Yep.
And it got me raging. I was like, are you kidding me? I got so mad at this last part when the king every damn time he like figures it out and he like ruins everything and I'm like, get out of here, go away. I don't like you.
He knows everything.
But also I have another person to add on our don't fuck with list.
Okay.
That's
I actually hate that little ginger bitch.
I don't know if she's a ginger, but whatever hair color she has, we hate her.
Yeah. She's not as bad as like the king or Arabin, but yeah. We don't like her. She
ratted them out. Yeah, she had zero regrets about it. She was like, oh, what's this letter Sorscha wrote? Oh, I'm going to turn her into the king. Makes me real mad.
Boo, Amity.
I did have a little thought, though. I wonder if the king had been controlling her, if this was all of her own will. I guess it was probably of her own will.
Probably, yeah. Either way, okay. We hate her.
Yeah. So that ends chapter 63. Moving on to chapter 64. Okay, I have more thoughts, obviously, but my first initial thought was no thoughts, just terror. It was so scary. As soon as they all got brought in there, I was like, I don't like this.
No.
I don't like it at all.
Yep.
And the king and his stupid little cronies ruin everything. But I also have to give major props to Dorian for finally standing up to his father. And I loved his line when he says, I can't stand the thought of her spending another minute in this festering shithole you call a court. And I was like, you tell him, Dorian.
He went from 0 to 100 real quick. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, I have to be honest. I was like, Dorian, this is maybe not the time to go there, right? Maybe use some tact,
true.
some strategy here.
That was the time to be political, not emotional.
Thank you. Instead, he was like, this place is a festering shithole. And you're like, okay, is that going to achieve our goal here? Probably not.
I still loved it, though. I can't remember if we've talked about this before. I feel like we have. But with the description of the king's special spy guards, are they infiltrated with the Valg demons too? Or are they just under a separate influence from the king?
I don't think they're infiltrated with Valg demons. I think it's possible they're just normal men who want to do the king's bidding because they're evil. Worst case, I mean, maybe he's influencing them a little bit, but it would not surprise me if they were just willing to blindly serve him and do his bad bidding, honestly.
Well, Aedion has a thought where he thinks their uniforms were those of the men who had hunted Ren. They had the same dead eyes and the same vileness that had made him not at all regret killing their colleagues in the alley. And the whole dead eyes thing, that seems...
You know what? That's true because it reminds me a lot in TOG when we get those descriptions of Chaol noticing the look in the Duke's eyes, how it was otherworldly or vacant. And I feel like that description is pretty similar to what he described with the Duke. And we know the Duke is obviously under the king's influence with the ring and everything.
Right.
So it's very possible. I don't think they're being inhabited by Valg. That would be a lot. But I do think they possibly could be being influenced.
Yeah, I'm going to say influence. That's the camp I'm going to sit in.
That seems reasonable. I also wanted to note that Chaol sees a carved round bit of familiar black stone resting on the small table beside the king. It's described that he couldn't see what it was, but it made his stomach turn over. I think this has to be a word stone or a piece of obsidian or something. I'm wondering if he just has that kind of shit lying around everywhere or if that one in particular is important. I don't think it's a word key. I highly doubt he would just have one out.
Yeah, no.
But wordstone, definitely, possibly. And then, of course, we have to talk about how everyone decides they're going to confess and how that plays out. I loved this. Aedion's like, I'm going to risk it all. Chaol's like, I'm going to risk it all. Dorian's like, I'm going to risk it all. Except for Sorscha, the actual traitor. She's not like, let me confess so I can save these people. Sorscha's like, but I love Dorian. Like, okay, but whatever.
Fair enough.
Let me just say, it's time for my favorite part of every episode. It's time for me to put my Chaol Defender hat on. And if anybody has an embroidery machine, if you could actually make me a hat that says Chaol Defender, I will quite literally put it on during the episode because I feel like I'm going to be wearing this hat for another 4 books. So let me read this quote. Aedion, who had survived for so long without hope, holding together his kingdom as best he could, who would never see the queen he so fiercely loved, he deserved to meet her and she deserved to have him serve in her court. Chaol took a breath, preparing himself for the words that would doom him. And I don't ever want to hear anyone say anything bad about Chaol ever again. Look at what he was willing to do to sacrifice for Aedion and Aelin just to even have a chance at meeting each other, okay? And I never want to hear anyone badmouth Chaol on this podcast, in real life, in our DMs. Never, because are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How can you read that and be like, Chaol? Like, he was literally willing to risk a horrible fate, death, torture. Also, Aedion and Aelin, he could give them the gift of seeing each other one last time. And I'm heated, okay? I'm heated. I don't understand why people don't like Chaol. I don't understand.
But wait, you're not done.
But wait, I am not done. Thank you. I actually wrote that in my notes so that Lorraine would know I was not done. Aedion then turns around to do the exact same thing. And his quote is, because for a flicker, as those turquoise eyes met with his, there was none of that rage or triumph, only a message to the queen that Aedion would never see. And there were no words to convey it, the love and hope and the pride, the sorrow at not knowing her as the woman she had become, the gift Aedion thought he was giving her and sparing Chaol's life. And I just, my heart, I knew I made the right choice when I picked my 2 book boyfriends from this series, okay? All that Dorian, Rowan shit, get that away from me, okay? It's Aedion and Chaol forever. The 2 most honorable, wonderful men. And what did Dorian do during the scene? Nothing, okay? Well, that's not true, but you get my point, okay? I know he did. I know. He did redeem himself. I don't really mean that, but
He
Aedion
got
and Chaol.
trapped by a foul collar.
I know. But Aedion and Chaol, okay, I love them. I love them.
Oh, I know. I will say it was super, super gallant. Those were my thoughts about Aedion and Chaol during this. They're very gallant, very honorable, but I couldn't believe when Aedion gave himself up. I believe it because that's an Aedion thing to do, but I was just like in disbelief because I was like, no.
I know.
Especially because then they revealed everything to the king too, and they didn't even need to. I think that's the thing that really got me the most.
Oh
like,
my God.
King did all this for nothing because the king had nothing on y'all. But
let this be a lesson to everyone. Never admit, always deny until the very last possible second. 99% of the time, it does not work out in your favor. Case in point here, the king did not know officially what was going on. He only knew about Sorscha and instead trapped not one, not two, but all four of them. Okay? And they were all too stupid to keep their mouths shut and deny. Okay? It just...
Also, this is totally unrelated to anything, but I was imagining you with a fedora on for your Chaol Defender session.
A fedora? Okay, that is offensive. I am a fashionable person, sort of. And I would not wear a fedora.
But like somebody who is like staunchly defending something, so like I feel like that person would wear a fedora.
Lorraine, I have the best idea. Okay,
you're gonna get a fedora?
No, ew, God, no. Bleh. No, I just told you I'm like reasonably fashionable. I think I should get a random hat, like a different hat that I find in my house, and every episode I should just put it on.
Whatever. Just put a little note on it that says Chaol Defender.
No, but I think it would be funny if it was a different one every time. I can think of at least like 6 hats in this house, like a pink cowboy hat. Yeah, okay, this is a good idea. I'm going to remind me to pick a hat for different episodes.
You should have live a little Sardothian hat.
Live a little Sardothian? No, I really do want an embroidered hat that says Chaol Defender. I really do. My friend has an embroidery machine now. Maybe I'll have her make me one.
That'd be really funny.
It would be.
Okay, anyways. Sorry, everyone. We got sidetracked about Chaol Defenders and fedoras. But to get back on point, this Aedion's sacrifice is why we love him. His commitment to the cause is unmatched, and he would rather die if it meant at least Chaol or Dorian could make it out to warn the others. And most importantly, he knew that Chaol is important to Aelin. And so he did it for Aelin. And then, yeah, obviously, as we just discussed, it is incredibly infuriating that the king didn't actually know anything for certain, and he set everybody up. And then they all fell for it.
No knowledge, just vibes.
Now, once we changed to Sorscha's perspective and got her truth, I was very surprised by that. I was wrong about her being a secret Kraken. That was not the case. But
I forgot about that.
Things why Sorscha had been so quiet and secretive. And now we also know what her role ultimately was in this book.
That's true. It also explains why she wasn't shook when Chaol told her and Dorian everything about the king and what he was up to. Because remember, we were like, yeah, that was a little weird that she was like hearing this really crazy, unsettling news. And she was just like, meh. And so I still stand by my analysis that maybe some of it she'd already speculated just being a seen, not heard person in the castle. But it does explain that scene a lot more here. I also have to say, I am low-key mad at myself for not figuring this out. I went back in my ebook and they quite literally talk about her writing a letter to a friend at the very beginning of the book, literally back in chapter 6, which I think is the first chapter where we meet Sorscha. And I quote, "She still had her weekly letter to write to her friend who wanted every little detail about the palace. And how did I miss that? How did I miss that? How did we miss that?" And I
don't know.
God, I was so mad. And then you add that to the scene when Dorian bursts in on her and she jumps and scrawls a line down the middle of the letter that she was writing to her friend. Why would you do that? When you actually think about that, imagine if I was writing a little note and you came in, I wouldn't be like, and like, scribble it out. I'd just be like,
right.
I'd probably so obvious now.
But I wouldn't like scribble it out. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
suspicious.
So we should have caught that. Also, I am just absolutely devastated in this scene that Sorscha never gets to tell Dorian that she never betrayed him. She only reported on the king and his movements, but never him. And now he'll never know.
I do have a lot of respect for Sorscha in keeping Dorian out of her rebel reports and ultimately how she also helped Dorian. She was the one that made the tonics for him in order to keep him safe. And I do think that she had really grown to love him.
Oh, yeah.
Like me, of course. And she knew he wasn't the enemy just by being the Prince of Aedon.
Yeah. Also, this is not off topic, but I feel a little sad for Sorscha that she never got any action with Dorian before she died. Like the night before, he was like, "You wanna?" And she was like, "No, not yet." And I'm like, "Girl, you should have done it. Life's too short. Just
live a little, Sorscha.
Live a little, Sorscha." That's what we should have told her. So, poor Sorscha.
Now she'll never know, and we won't either. So that's the end of chapter 64. Moving on to chapter 65.
So for this chapter, obviously, I hate the King of Aedon, but I did think that this was kind of funny. So they behead Sorscha, and Chaol's like, absolutely not, and takes out his sword. And it's described as, the king rolled his eyes, put away your sword, Catherine. I have no interest in your noble antics. You're to go home to your father tomorrow. Don't leave this castle in disgrace. And I don't know why, but I just picture the king being like, classic Chaol, not today. I'm not here for your noble nonsense today. Go do that somewhere else. I don't know why, but that was just kind of funny to me, actually.
I wonder if the king kind of thinks Chaol is a little dumb or something.
Obnoxious, probably. His noble bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
But he was like, you're not a threat. Get out of here.
Literally. He rolls his eyes. He's like, what now, Chaol? It's like a Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada. Go bore someone else with your questions. That's what it comes across as to me, right? Chaol also realizes that there had been other guards in the room and that they were hidden behind impossibly thick shadows. I 100% think the king was using some bad magic to hide more guards. Also, Lorraine, I know you will like this. Using shadows makes me think of Maeve and her powers. And it's described the shadows were trailing Rowan and Selena when they make their way into Doranel. And so there's two different depictions of that kind of shadowy power. And so I was like, oh God, here's Lorraine and her crazy Maeve, crazy king. But I did think that was an interesting description because Chaol, Aedion, all of them, they're trained killers. They're pretty smart. And so I think it's odd that they were caught off guard by hidden guards, which means I feel like magic was being used to conceal them.
Absolutely. That seems like a very king thing to do. Anyways, as I stated before, I thought that Chaol was pretty gallant in this scene. Now that you pointed out that it was kind of silly, it was when you read it. You're like, oh, he wasn't going to do anything. He tried really hard, but it wasn't going to get him anywhere.
Yeah.
But I did kind of feel like this is the moment where Chaol has finally picked his side. And I love that he stands up to the king and says, I will not go to Aniel and I will not serve you a moment longer. There is one true king in this room. There always has been. And he is not sitting on that throne. There is a queen in the north and she has already beaten you once. She will beat you again and again. Because what she represents and what your son represents is what you fear most. Hope. You cannot steal it no matter how many you rip from their homes and enslave. And you cannot break it no matter how many you murder. And I was like, hell yeah, Chaol, you tell him.
Yeah. See, you need a Chaol defender hat now. That's what I'm getting from this.
Yay, Chaol. I'll just have a little flag.
Oh, that would be cute.
Every time.
Yay,
Chaol does something. And then I really want to talk about the fact that King knew about Dorian's magic. I don't know why that surprised me so much, but before Dorian goes like superpower prince on the broom, the king says, I knew you had it, boy, which obviously we're like, what does he mean by that? For how long? What does he know about Dorian's power? Why hadn't he done anything before? So many questions.
I have to be honest, this actually did not surprise me that much that the king knew or speculated. It's not like Dorian even knew what was happening to him at first, and he clearly doesn't have any control over it. Like that time that he punched the wall.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was kind of in public, and it's not really Dorian's fault. He had no idea what was happening to him, right? Dorian probably was trying to be really sneaky about it and hide it, but the magic is kind of uncontrollable and has a will of its own. So it doesn't surprise me that he was able to at least speculate it. It's also possible that he could actually sense it too.
True. I just wonder like why he was waiting. Like if he already knew, why didn't he do anything about it sooner? And then one of my questions that I think I posed later is just what is he planning on doing with Dorian now that he knows he has magic and he gets collared, but we'll get there when we get there. So
yeah. I also loved when Dorian tells Chaol that when he comes back to burn this place to the ground. I actually feel like this is a subtle nod to Celaena's power, and Dorian is trying to tell Chaol to get Celaena and bring her back and use her fire power to overthrow the king. There's some nice double meaning there, right? Because he could have said, destroy this place, but he said, burn it to the ground. And I feel like when you say burn, I think firepower. When I think firepower, I think Aelin, you know?
So you already know that I've been a big lover of Dorian, but this battle scene really just endeared me to him as he fends off the king to give Chaol time to escape. Because despite the tension they've experienced the past several months, Dorian and Chaol are truly brothers, and I got a little teary-eyed when Chaol thinks he looked at his friend, perhaps for the last time, and said what he had always known from the moment they'd met when he understood that the prince was his brother and soul. I love you. Dorian merrily nodded, eyes still blazing, and lifted his hands again toward his father. Brother, friend, king.
Oh, I loved it.
I also think it was hugely monumental that Dorian was able to see Chaol make this choice. And I think Chaol still has reservations about the future because he doesn't know what will happen when Celaena gets back. But the fact that Chaol chooses Dorian and recognizes that he should be king, even with his magic, is a huge step. And I'm sure really means a lot to Dorian. So
I think so too. I also love directly after this, in the tiny little scene we get with Aedion as he's being led to the dungeons, he says, he did not mind dying, though he wished he'd still gotten a chance to see her just once. And if that didn't just rip your heart out, I don't know what will. If Aedion dies before they're reunited, I will never recover. I will never recover from that. I refuse to believe that. I will it into existence that they will get to be together. I think they will. I think she's probably going to do some big daring rescue, but that just broke me. Just like that's his last thought.
Especially because you have to remember, Aedion thought Aelin was dead. And then he was reinvigorated with hope. He's like, oh my gosh, she's alive. This is really cool. I'm going to go meet her and help her. And then now he has to sacrifice himself to the king. And he's like, oh, I have lost my chance. And speaking of heartbreak and gut punching moments, it was really sad getting Dorian's inner thoughts about at least knowing Chaol had gotten away, and when he reaches for Sorscha's body while he's getting battered by the king's magic.
Oh my god, trying to put her back together.
And the fact that it's like his own father who's just like blasting him with whatever dark magic he has. I was like, oh my god. But here's the real question, okay? Real talk. When the king collars Dorian, what do you think his plan is for him? I would assume he's either going to use him as a food source for like a Valg prince, or just to keep him locked up so he can't fight back against him. But in either case, I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
See, my first thought was Dorian has magic. The king can probably sense that he has pretty powerful. And so Dorian would make a great host for a very powerful Valg. And now that he's out of general, like Narok, well, you said
that's what I meant. It's like a food source, because that's what the Valg do. They feed off the foods. Yeah, they like feed off of them. Remember the Valgs were like,
I know, but
for memory sips only, like energy feed, like use him.
Okay, it just was a weird way to describe it. I'm like, why is the Valg going to eat Dorian? I don't know. When you said food source, you lost me. Okay, yeah. Okay, but yeah, basically, I think he's going to use Dorian as a host for a Valg, a very powerful Valg that then he can manipulate and control.
Yes, okay.
Food
We're
source.
on the same page.
So
they are food to them. The magic is their food.
Okay, it's weird, but okay, I'll roll with it. But so after this, Chaol makes his escape. Before we get into his escape, I just want to say I freaking called this back in like TOG com, whatever. I think it was TOG. Back in TOG, as soon as we got introduced As, as soon as we got introduced to those little secret tunnels and the little secret exit out of the castle, I said, oh, this is going to be used for some big escape. Now, granted, I thought it would be for Selena or Nehemia, but obviously it's not going to be for Nehemia. And Selena's in Wentland right now. So I was right, sort of. It is going to be used for an escape. I knew that was going to come in handy later.
No, they're perfect. Yeah, I'm surprised nobody has. Maybe other people have used them before that we just didn't know about.
Yeah, and now I wonder if they'll be using them to sneak back into the castle to rescue Dorian.
Oh, I'm sure, probably. This is also another minor thing from this chapter, but I am so happy that Chaol took Fleetfoot and plans to take him with them wherever he and Ren go next. Because I was like, don't leave Fleetfoot. Like,
I know. I kind of forgotten Fleetfoot existed.
I know.
And so I was happy that I'm like, okay, someone took care of the dog.
Yeah.
Speaking of forgotten characters, Mort, hello. I totally forgot about him. It kind of surprised me that Mort didn't also start talking shit to Chaol for taking Damaris, because he gave Selena such a hard time for desecrating a sacred tomb. And so I do find it a little odd character-wise that Mort would not shut up and calm, and now he ain't talking to nobody. It's a little odd to me, I will say.
Right, which kind of makes me think that maybe Mort is only allowed to talk to certain people. I don't know.
Maybe descendants
but
of Brandon?
We did find maybe, except for he did talk to Nehemia.
Oh,
So
damn,
that was the
you're
only
right.
wrench in that idea. But I'm surprised that Mort didn't say anything to Chaol, because Mort, you've been listening to them running around down this tunnel like all of Heir of Fire, and you never said anything to them.
And never.
Or like you never felt like you wanted to help them with anything.
Not very helpful of him.
Yeah. Bad door knocker. I do have a couple random questions. Maybe they're more rhetorical than anything, 'cause we're not going to get those answers now. Or I don't know, maybe you do have some thoughts, but where do you think Chaol and Ren are going to go? And what do you think will happen to Aedion?
Ooh, I think the end of this chapter seems to indicate that they're going to stay in Rifthold and they're going to rescue Dorian and Aedion. So I think they're just going to use Selena's apartment unless it no longer becomes safe, and they're going to get Dorian and Aedion out.
I hope so. I also felt like it was significant that Chaol now has Damaris and that he will use that sword for something big. For what, I am not sure at this point, but perhaps its ability to see the truth of what something is will help Chaol slay the Valg, or perhaps be involved in destroying a tower. I don't know. It feels important, though.
I agree. I think the sword needs to end up with Aelin. It just feels like a sacred, powerful sword for the Heir of Fire. Seems like they should be together.
True.
So I'm glad he took it, though. I'm really glad, because I still find it a little odd that the king never took Damaris. But then again, the king does have his ancient evil sword, Nothung, so maybe he didn't need two ancient swords. I don't know. But I'm glad that he took Damaris. I feel like Damaris is going to become important for sure.
I think so, too.
I also think it's safe to say that Chaol has officially made his choice. And I think this is evident when it's described, Chaol didn't hesitate as he gripped the rebel's outstretched hand. And I think this is just a symbolic representation of Chaol officially making his choice. He is like, fuck the king. You know what I mean? Like, he's done. He's over it. Yeah, exactly.
So that concludes chapter 65. Moving on to chapter 66. We check back in with the witches quite briefly. And first off, we know Duke Barrington is in Morath with Kaltain and Roland. We can speculate that the king has another army and possibly some Valg princes being created, stored, and fed there. By sending the witches there, does this mean the king is planning on launching an attack soon? If so, where? Also, Granny Blackbeak won't initially be coming to Morath with the rest of the witches because she has work to finish. After period gap such Omega, what work is she referring to? What else are the witches doing there other than to train? I don't trust Granny. Plain and simple.
At all. Yeah. When she said that, it really did make me wonder what other schemes or plans are going on in the background that Manon and the 13 don't know about. Yeah, I just agree.
Yeah. The more I think about it, though, the more I just don't see how, even if they fight for the king, he's not going to let the witches walk away to the waste at the end and just let them have their kingdom back. That man has dominated basically all of Aurelia, and once he sees how useful the witches are in war, I don't trust him to keep his word, because he has no incentive to do so. You know what I mean?
I mean, the incentive, though, is that the witches will always be under his control. Even if he lets them go have their little kingdom in the waste, if he ever needs them again, I think it's kind of a mutual, I'll let you have your little kingdom, do whatever you want, just don't interfere with my stuff. And whenever I need you, you're expected to come. I think he will, as long as he thinks he can control them and the wyverns. I think he's fine with letting them live because they're a great weapon. I mean, they're terrifying and efficient and lethal. So why wouldn't you want them around?
I guess I was just thinking of it like they may be able to go back to the waste, but yeah, like you said, they will still always be under his control.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're never going to escape that unless they kill him.
All right. So next we'll move on to chapter 67. This was also a very short chapter, but it was so powerful and so moving. It seems very clear that Chaol is going to have a journey, to say the least, and his path forward to help in this cause will not be easy. And that worries me a lot. But I really love that Chaol has taken a stand and can see the bigger picture of why this cause is so important. The idea that people should be free from tyrannical reigns of someone like the King of Aedon, and that all people can live in peace and prosper rather than be confined and oppressed. And I especially love the line that says, there was a new sword at his side, an ancient king's blade, from a time when good men had served noble rulers and the world had prospered for it. He would see that world reborn again, even if it took his last breath.
Ooh, yeah. So that actually made me a little nervous that it might be foreshadowing that Chaol will die, that even if it took his last breath. And I could definitely see him making some huge sacrifice that is needed to restore Aelin and Addison. I'm very worried about Chaol's fate. I had not really thought about it until now, but he would also be a great main to die in the big battle at the end or, in the second to last book. And I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. It does not sound good. I also think it's important to note the rest of that quote, which is, even if he had no name now, no position or title save oathbreaker, traitor, liar. And the fact that Chaol still thinks this about himself is really indicative of his honor, but also his internal conflict that I feel like he will continue to struggle with as we progress through the rest of the series. It's like, Chaol, you're literally fighting against an evil king. No one is going to construe your actions as traitorous, liar, oathbreaker, but in the most technical sense, he is a traitor, a liar, and an oathbreaker to the king, but also the king is evil. And so his moral compass is just it's so right and also so wrong at the same time.
It's just too black and white with Chaol.
Yeah.
He's very much like this is the specific oath that I made, and so I have to keep this oath, even if it's like so stringent, But I will say there's just a lot of symbolism to this scene. Chaol is making his choice and accepting that A, the King of Aedon must be defeated, and B, there is a world where there can be peace, both in general and amongst different kinds of beings. Gavin Haviliard was the first king of the Haviliards, and he was human, as far as we know, but he had helped Elena Galathinius, who descended from a magical Fae lineage, and they had fought together against a common evil and consequently ruled in peace. And so I think Chaol taking Damaris is also symbolic of unity that's to come as well, hopefully.
Oh.
And the scene does feel reminiscent of Elena and Gavin's roles and perhaps foreshadows Selena and Chaol's roles, minus the relationship part. Chaol is a human like Gavin was, and Selena is obviously magical and fae. And with their combined efforts, they can bring back a freed Aurelia. Chaol is most representative of a regular human, as well as Audilonians as a non-magical person, while Selena represents the magical beings, obviously, as a demi-fae. And I think that Chaol and Selena had previously had a relationship, I think does give this even more relevance to just the symbolic importance of how they're going to come together.
Damn! Retweet. No notes. Agree.
Could write a whole essay about
the
symbolism of Heir of Fire.
Yeah. For literally a chapter that wasn't even a full page. I think you wrote more about the chapter than the actual words in the chapter.
I did, indeed.
Yeah.
This is why we have a podcast.
Yeah.
So we can just yap.
It's making me think of that chapter in Calm, the princess and the queen in the tomb. It's like 157 words. And I was like, let's talk about it for 36 minutes.
Yeah, we had a lot of thoughts for something so short, but
yeah. Whoops.
All right, so now we are on our final chapter, chapter 68, which was also very short. And it looks like you have thoughts to start with. So go ahead.
Always, all the time. So first of all, my first question is, why did I write this in all caps? I was feeling very passionately when I wrote this, but I have a question. And that question is, what the actual fuck? Okay. Why did Sarah J. Maas write literally an entire book trying to get me to like Rowan, only to tell me at the end of the book he wasn't going to Aurelia? Why? So he's just not going to be in the book? How long is he not going to be in the book? Because the way I understand it is he's not going because magic is not there, right? So he is too suspicious in his Fae form, draws too much attention, or he'll be trapped in his Hawk form, which he's kind of no good in his Hawk form, sort of. So if he can't come until magic is restored, then either they're going to have to restore magic very early in Queen of Shadows, which kind of seems unlikely given that seems like a huge plot point, something that'd be very difficult to pull off. Or Rowan won't be there until at least halfway through the book, if not even later.
Yeah.
So it's like, you got us to like Rowan, you did all this work introducing him, they're Kara Nom, there's the Blood Oath, and now it's like, oh, bye, Rowan.
I know.
A little frustrating to be honest.
No, I totally agree. And it was really sad to see Rowan stay in Wendelin, but I guess Selena's reasoning does make a lot of sense because flying around as a hawk for who knows how long is certainly not ideal either.
Yeah.
But I also understand Rowan's desire to ensure that she's safe, even if he can't use magic, though, because Selena is, well, kind of enemy number one, but also like the most important person ever, right?
Yeah.
Because she's literally presumably the only one that's going to take down the king, right? So it's really sad. I hope that he does come back. Like, I'm okay if we have to wait half a book. Great, but I don't want to wait a full book for him to come back into the picture again. Hopefully not, but that is for SGM to figure out for us, I guess. We're going to have to figure out how he's going to get written back into the picture.
I need Mala's warmth and presence to come around me and just remind me to trust the process.
For real. But speaking of letters from earlier with Sorscha's letter thing, Selena did actually send a letter out when they had gone to investigate. We had talked about that. And I remember noting it because I found it odd that she would actually send a letter out when they were just scouting for information. But here again, she had been writing to people in Aurelia. And I was like, oh, she did actually write a letter.
I felt so dumb because I even remember you asked me that. And I was like, no, of course not. She's just pretending. Like, who would she send a letter to? And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I was wrong. And damn it.
Sarah J. Maas and her letters. I guess we have to look out for letters now. That's like a twist.
Right? Added to the never-ending list.
Yep. So after that, I did find Rowan's quote and her thought interesting when he reveals what he had prayed to Mala for. It says, for some reason, Mala likes me and agreed that you and I make a formidable pair, but she didn't want to know, didn't want to think about the sun goddess and her agenda as she flung herself on Rowan. So again, what is Mala's role ultimately in this series? Is Mala just there to be a guiding spirit like Elena was, or is she going to come up more prominently in some way? But if nothing else, it is an indication that Rowan and Selena are supposed to stay together, or that's how I'm going to interpret it, because Blood Oath and Karanom aside, if they had a cereal in this world, it would say, stay with the prince.
Boo. Boo. Oh my gosh. You were such a Rowan fangirl. Yeah. I took it to mean basically that Rowan prayed to be away from Maeve and that he could be with Aelin or bonded to Aelin or whatever. And so, I mean, it seems pretty heavily implied that's what he prayed for. Now, I will say, oh my God, it literally causes me physical pain to say this. I did wonder if he prayed something about like if there is a mating bond for her to accept it or something. I'm surprised that you did not think that or posit that idea.
I think I was just looking at it overarchingly. The fact that whatever he prayed for, Mala was like, okay. Yeah, she granted it. And I think that that means that she views it favorably. And even Selena's conversation with Mala, where she was like nudging her to accept the blood oath because she could trust Rowan and she should trust her own instinct about that too. And so I feel like that's just important. They have the approval from the sun goddess herself.
Wow. It's really, when you say it like that, it's really hard not to support it.
But to round out this chapter, I love the plan that she lays out and her dedication to it. But I'm also just overwhelmed. Okay. Not a single one of those things is even a little bit easy. I'm very excited, but I'm also very nervous to see how this all goes down in terms of confronting Urban Hamel, confronting the king. She's got to free all these people. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And I'm filled with a little bit of hope and optimism, but mostly dread and fear.
Mm-hmm. So that ends our analysis. Now we just have our favorite moments to do, and then we'll do our final book wrap up. So, Addison, what were your favorite moments?
To kick off our favorite moments, I absolutely love that Rowan did everything in his power to protect Selena from Maeve, specifically by giving her Goldrin. It was just such a clever ploy, and I just love this part of the plot, right? I mean, it happened at the end of part 1, right? So the fact that it carried all the way through and Rowan was always calculating to take care of Aelin, I really like that.
I do too. And my favorite part after this was when she gets the tattoos done over her scars specifically, because she's like rewriting her story basically. But the line was 3 lines of text scrolled over her 3 largest scars, the story of her love and loss now written on her. 1 line for her parents and uncle, 1 line for Lady Marian, and 1 line for her court and her people. On the smaller, shorter scars were the stories of Nehemia and of Sam, her beloved dead.
Oh, I know. That's one of my favorite chapters in the whole book, actually. And similarly, I love the description of when he's doing the tattoo and she thinks, with each sting of Rowan's needle, she beseeched the faceless immortals to take the souls of her loved ones into their paradise and keep them safe. She told them of their worth, told them of their good deeds and loving words and brave acts they'd perform. Never pausing for more than a breath, she chanted the prayers she owed them as daughter and friend and heir. I know. I was like, stop.
And it's still part of the same scene. I really liked her line. This was a joint one when it says, no longer would they be locked away in her heart. No longer would she be ashamed.
Oh, I know. That whole little scene, I just copy paste that to the episode. Thank you.
Yep.
As heartbreaking as the scene was with Keely and Petra and that whole sadness, I loved when Manon is observing from bird's eye view and she thinks Keely was still breathing and fighting like hell to keep steady. Not to survive, Keely knew she would be dead any moment. She was fighting for the witch on her back. And I just have such a soft spot for dragons, wyverns, whatever. In my mind, they're dragons. But I just have such a spot for them and that they're sacrificed for the riders. Anytime an animal dies to save their owner or rider or whatever, it just no.
Oh, I know. I really didn't mention this and I probably should have. But yeah, the whole unconditional love and the bond between the witches and their wyverns is so, it just reminds me of me and my dingoes and how they look at me with unconditional love. And they're so cute.
And for pets and for treats all the time.
Yeah. But the other in this chapter as well with Manon in Abraxos and Keely and Petra, I like when Manon thinks, but all she could see was the unconditional love in that dying wyvern's eyes as she unbuckled her harness, stood from the saddle, and leapt off Abraxos.
Yes, that cruel, heartless Manon. From a reading perspective, I did thoroughly enjoy when they all get summoned to the king. And I love that Chaol was so easily willing to give up his life just so Aedion and Aelin could even have a chance at being reunited. And then Aedion making the exact same choice. And all I have to say is I have the 2 best book boyfriends in this series, by Dorian, by Rowan. Okay? They cannot hold a candle to Aedion and Chaol. Immediately they were like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice the other person. Get out of here. Okay, I love them. Love them.
Fair enough. Rowan did take a blood oath now, though. And I feel like
yeah, okay.
Have some sacrifices coming. We'll see. Hopefully not, but
don't count on that. Don't get.
I know. Okay, and then in the same chapter as this one, this was another combined one between both of us. There was a quote that said, "He looked at his friend, perhaps for the last time, and said what he had always known from the moment they met, when he understood that the prince was his brother in soul. I love you." Dorian merely nodded, eyes still blazing, and lifted his hand again toward his father. Brother, friend, king.
I really do enjoy in this book. I feel like it's not very common to do open, loving relationships between friendships and especially male friends. And I appreciate that. I'm sorry. Men should definitely have friends that they love and care about and cherish. And it's okay for them to tell them they love each other. I like that. That's very refreshing.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't see that in a lot of, not just fantasy books, any books, really.
Mm-hmm. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh my gosh. We're so fancy. I love the chapter with Chaol when he throws his eagle-shaped pommel sword into the water and he makes his choice to join the rebels. And specifically, I like, although it makes me very anxious, when it says he would see that world reborn even if it took to his last breath. And it's just really powerful, but also nauseating because I'm like, oh my God, is his last breath coming soon?
Yeah, that does not make me feel good about Chaol's future,
Mm-mm.
but again, very gallant on his part. My last one that I noted was, "I will gather the rest of my court, our court, and then we will raise the greatest army the world has ever witnessed. And then I am going to rattle the stars." And I love the rattle the stars one because I feel like that's the quote that you see like all the time. And I knew it was related to Throne of Glass, but I didn't know when it was going to happen. And maybe there's another part for this, but I just really like that. Just going to change everything up. And it reminds me of the beginning of Throne of Glass when she leaves in Dovier and they stop. Remember when they had that scene where they camp outside of the city and she's like sitting outside? I don't remember the exact quote about the stars, but it really remembered that. So
I think it's when Dorian is observing her and it's like a beautiful girl smiling at the stars and the stars that smiled back or something like that.
Yes.
I do.
Yes,
wow. Yeah. And I am so proud of myself because that was like 8 months ago, several thousand pages. So I am like, wow. Can I call myself a TOG expert? I think I can.
Yeah,
I think
I don't remember. I did not. I just knew it was about stars and I remember where it was, but I did not remember the exact quotes. Good job.
Wow. I'm going to ride that high all night. Like, wow. And last but not least, I mean, this is just what a way to end the book. But I love when it says, "She lifted her face to the stars. She was Aelin Ashraver Galathinius, heir of 2 mighty bloodlines, protector of a once glorious people, and queen of Terrasen. She was Aelin Ashraver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid." And if that did not give you chills, goosebumps, a tingling sensation in your spine, if you did not just look to the stars, but it just, it filled me with such hope.
And it's really nice that throughout her whole journey so far, she has always remembered that line and it's a tribute to Sam. You know, like it's just the little part of Sam that she keeps with her.
And just what a way to honor her cherished, beloved ones.
Yeah.
Man, what an emotional journey. Well, speaking of emotional journey, it's time to move on to our official book wrap up, where we give our rating, a review, and just talk all things of the total body of work. Lorraine, starting with you, can you give us your star rating and why you gave it the rating you did?
I gave Heir of Fire 5 stars.
No, you didn't.
I did. I loved every moment of this book. The world building was incredible. There was so much action, all of the wonderful growth that we got for our characters and their relationships to other characters. It was a beautiful mix of emotional, heart-tugging moments combined with action, excitement, suspense, terror. Like you got a full range of emotions out of this book. And I especially love the development we see in Selena as she finally overcomes like the biggest fear that she has ever carried with her, which is the fear that she had failed her family and everyone so deeply that there was no redemption left for her. And as we see, she is just renewed with hope and inspiration and determination, I think, to move forward and destroy the king, get those word keys, and
rattle those stars.
Rattle those stars and rebuild Terracin. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah, that's why I gave it 5 stars.
Fair
what did
enough.
You rate it?
Surprise, surprise. Addison was not 5-star impressed. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. The book was excellent, and we all know that, okay? So I think it would be easier for me to tell you why I shorted it a 1/4 of a star than to tell you what I liked about it, because we'll do our likes and dislikes in a minute. So I felt like part 1 dragged just a little too much for me. Don't get me wrong, I totally get the purpose that it serves, but I found it to be a little repetitive. We went through the whole Celaena and Rowan fight. Rowan is mean, Celaena is broken and feels nothing but sorrow cycle. Just a few too many times for me, and so it got a little redundant. I also felt the slow burn of action was just a teensy little bit too slow for me. It took just a little too long to get it going. And so don't get me wrong, I love like a big action ending, but it was just a little slow. So that is why I deducted a 1/4 of a star.
Okay, fair enough. I will say there was a lot of scenes that I was expecting that we didn't end up getting, I guess. Maybe that's something I can put in my dislikes. But yeah, like you said, everything kind of just happened at the end, and it didn't end up being as big of a thing as I think I anticipated it to be. So
like that damn blood oath. That damn blood oath. Oh my god. All right, well, speaking of, let's move on to our likes and dislikes for the book as a whole.
So I really loved almost everything in this book. The way Celaena's healing journey was weaved beautifully into a continuation of the plot was, as you like to say, chef's kiss.
Fair enough.
Voila. Yeah. I really didn't feel like there was too many boring moments. I guess when you mention it, and maybe had we read it a lot more quickly, I don't know. I'm not sure if that would have changed my opinion, but I didn't really notice the boring moments quite as much. And everything that occurred did feel pretty relevant and important, either because it's introducing us to things related to the plot or it's contributing to character development. So I enjoyed all of it.
The vibes were immaculate for you.
Yes, vibes were immaculate. I liked it a lot. And the only minor thing is my disappointment in how the 3rd word key was revealed.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, Rowan punching Celaena. I clearly have grown to like Rowan since then, but I think a dislike of him could have been conveyed without him punching her, like physically hurting her.
Yeah.
So I feel like just his stony demeanor and distance would have been enough for you to get the message, or just like some snarling words would have been sufficient to be like, okay, I don't know about him.
Yes.
I think punching was a little too far, maybe not too far, but it wasn't my favorite thing as far as ways to make you feel unsure about a character.
Yes. Welcome to Addison's TED Talk, because that is definitely included in my likes and dislikes. So I thought the absolute best part of this book, besides Aedion, of course, was the absolutely stunningly beautiful writing. I talked about this a lot in chapters 53 through 58, and that trend continued in this episode as well. I just cannot get over the use of descriptive language and the writing to describe the character growth. I said it in the last episode, but I'll say it again here. There was so much pressure put on this critical formative moment for Aelin's character on why she was the way she was. And I was worried, honestly. I was worried there was too much pressure on that moment and it would fall short. But Lady Marion's sacrifice was everything. And I mean, as everyone knows, I cried. I literally cried on a public podcast because it just was so moving to me. It lives in my head rent free. It really does. Additionally, all the language used to describe her healing, like the scene with Rowan tattooing her back, it really moved me. And I think that's part of why people love this series so much. And I think I'm really starting to get that. I loved all the side characters in the story. Emrys, Luca, Astra, and Sorscha. They really enhanced the story without taking away from the story and the main characters. And I really liked them a lot. But I would like more of them, except for Sorscha, because R.I.P.
She is
R.I.P. Yep. And then for my dislikes, as I said earlier, part 1 was a little too slow of a burn for me and a bit repetitive. I also feel like sometimes the multiple perspectives was a little disjointed. We would go really long stretches of chapters without ever circling back to Dorian or Aedion or the witches. And sometimes it made it a little hard to track the character storyline because there was too much time in between chapters before we circled back. But I do like multiple perspectives, so kind of a mixed bag there. I also, surprise, surprise, think that SJM wrote Rowan a little too awful. I am warming up to him, but he was cruel, like actually awful. As you said, the punching, telling her the world would have been better off if he were dead 10 years ago. I mean, ugh, that does not age well, okay? And it's really hard for me to get over that. We've gotten lots of comments like, oh, but his backstory is so awful, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I don't care, okay? It doesn't justify his cruelty. I will die on this hill, okay? I do feel like there is more to his backstory than we got in this book, but I highly, highly doubt it is worse than what Aelin went through. And even she was never cruel to anyone. She was unpleasant and gruff and prickly. Like when she told Emrys and Lucas she didn't care, that was mean. But she never got close to the level that Rowan did. And it doesn't read well. And
true,
he hasn't done enough for me to forget that he did that. Or apologize. I would like him to apologize. Honestly, that's what I want. Almost done, I swear. Okay. I would have liked to see more Dorian. I don't understand why the fandom is obsessed with him or Rowan for that matter. Dorian's hardly in this book. And basically every scene with him was like, oh, Sorscha, you're so cute, but my magic, oh no. And it's just like, okay, but like, what did Dorian do in this book? Once again, kind of nothing. I'm actually convinced that SJM likes Chaol better than Dorian so far. Because Chaol gets way more page time. There's way more character development for him. There's way more focus on Chaol right now, honestly. And then I would have liked more information about the king. I know it will all come together, but even though he's the big bad, I didn't get the reveal of information about him and his plans like we have in the last two books. Almost like you kind of forget about him. You forget that he's like the main baddie bad because he's just in Aurelia doing whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. And so that was kind of a little like, why are we over here? I know that was a lot of dislikes, but other than that, I liked everything else. So
no, I think the point about the king, that's a good call out because to be honest, we learned barely nothing new about the king.
Nothing.
Like, dare I say hardly anything. Everything that we learned was confirmation of something that we speculated. There was no brand new reveals or anything like that. And so we're really not that much closer to figuring out how to defeat the king. I know. I will say with the Dorian point, I think Dorian becomes much more prominent either in this book or later. I feel like we're going to get a big chunk of time with Dorian at some point. We just haven't had it yet.
Okay.
I think so. Or at least I hope so.
Well,
but my impression is that we're going to get more page time with Dorian at some point in the series. So.
Well, not looking good for him in Queen of Shadows, not with the Wordstone collar on.
I know he's like gonna be a zombie basically, probably for I don't know how long, but
well, speaking of things we didn't get to know more enough about, what are some things that you want to know in the next book, hopefully?
Ooh, okay. I got a lot of questions, obviously. First and foremost, what the hell is up with Maeve? I would like to learn more about what her powers are and her history, honestly. Because, as we've said literally so many times, she's up to something. We can feel it. She is a baddie bad. We just don't know exactly in what way or why. I also want to know what is going to happen to Dorian. I think I posed a question earlier in this episode, but I do want to know what the king will do with him now that he's collared him. What is his purpose in keeping him collared? How long will he keep him collared for? There's a lot of questions about what's going to happen to Dorian. I also want to know, where is Chaol going to go? I think we may have talked about this too, but is he going to stay in Otterlin or is he going to head somewhere else? Because I would assume that staying in Otterlin is going to be pretty dangerous for him, obviously. I also want to know, what is Rowan doing in the meantime? Since he's stuck in Wendelin, it's not like he can go hang out with Maeve. He's separated from his cadre. There's not a ton of investigation he can do from Wendelin. I guess he's just going to hang out in Mistward.
Pretty much.
And then my final question is, where did the King of Otterlin actually store the word keys? It's clearly not in like a wearable item, or maybe it is, but as far as we know, it's not in any of his personal wearable items. The amulet of the Orin Thistle. The
amulet of the Orin. Oh man, we're getting goofy. Okay. We're not gonna make it through this. Oh my god.
Okay. The amulet of Orinth is a wearable item, but aside from that, it feels like he put the word keys somewhere else where nobody else can touch them or find them except for him. So where the fuck did he put them?
That's a good question. I hadn't even gotten that far because I was just hung up on the fact like, oh fuck, what are we gonna do? Like I didn't even get to the plan part.
Biggest question. What are we going to do?
Seriously. Well, my biggest question, you already know Heir of Hamel, who, what, when, where, why, and how. I know the redemption is coming. I know we're going to get to him in Queen of Shadows, and I am ready for it. Secondly, I am still not satisfied with the information we got about the blue word mark on Celaena's brow. I just know that there's more to it. I know we could not shut up about this in this episode, and I want to know. I refuse to believe it's just marking her lineage. No, I will no longer. I will come up with my own lore. Okay, how could you? That's all I think about. That stupid word mark on a freaking head. Okay,
nameless is my prize.
Nameless is my prize. Okay, you like my country accent? A little Sarnathian.
I knew that was coming.
For those of you, if you have not listened to our Tab episode, we were talking about in The Assassin in the Desert, and the audiobook narrator, Elizabeth Evans, gave Ansel like a little hick accent, and this lives rent-free in our heads, and I don't know why, but we really keyed on live a little Sarnathian as she's riding an Asterian mare through the Red Desert. And so for those of you who did not get a chance to listen to our Tab episodes, that is a joke we're referencing. Because it's not fun to be left out on a joke. So just in case, I just want to throw it out there for anybody.
Which really just means go listen to Tab if you haven't.
What a great idea. I couldn't have said it better myself. But I cannot believe I'm saying this. Kind of makes me want to throw up a little bit. But I do want to know more about Rowan, okay? I just don't feel like we got his full backstory. And I would like a little more anything on Rowan. I want to like him. I do. I'm not there yet. And then there are so many more questions, but I will end with Manon. I want to know everything about her. Why she is special, why her eyes are gold, what really happened with the Croctons and the Iron Teeth. Why is she the key to ending the curse? I want more. I demand more. I hope we get a lot in Queen of Shadows, but we'll see. Speaking of Queen of Shadows, do you have any predictions?
I feel like most of mine are pretty straightforward. Obviously, Celaena is going to side quest to confront Heir of Hamel and get that third word key. I also think that Celaena will hopefully rescue Aedion and Dorian, because that's a pretty big priority now that they are locked up. And then
Damn it, Lorraine.
We're laughing because we were talking about a playlist for Queen of Shadows, or just in general for Throne of Glass, and one of the songs we came up was for Dorian. It's locked up by Aecon.
You could apply it for so many, like Aedion's locked up right now. Celaena was locked up in Endovier. So many people were locked up at so many different times.
Yes. And then my final prediction, there is definitely going to be a major event taking place in Morath, I think, because that's where Caltaine and Duke Parrington, and something is going on there. We just didn't get a lot of information about that, but now we know that Manon and her 13 are going to be sent there.
Totally. I had not even thought about that. You're absolutely right. Well, before I give my predictions, I have a prediction question for you. And that is, will Celaena kill Arobin Hamel in Queen of Shadows?
Kill Arobin. That's pretty strong.
Yeah. Because like on gut reaction, you're like, yes, absolutely. But it's so obvious she has such conflicted feelings about him. They have a very tangled relationship. And when push comes to shove, will she be able to do it?
I'm not sure. I want to say, yes, but I could also see her deciding not to. I don't know, being like a bigger person or something. Especially because she's gone through such a transformation in this book. Yeah, to where she doesn't feel so much rage, just killing just to get it out. She's changed her ways since being an assassin, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's going to depend on what Arabin does
That's
moving
fair.
forward. I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just because he literally fucking betrayed her, as far as we know. And she ended up in Endovir, and then yada yada. The rest is history. And she had all these terrible things happen to her because of Arabin fucking Hamill. So if he dies, peace.
Right. Yeah. I thought about this question for a long time, and I would be like, yes, no, yes, no, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if she goes to do it, but can't bring herself to do it, and then somebody else does, like Rowan, Chaol, or something.
Yeah.
Or I feel like there might be this moment where she's about to kill him, and he's like, do it. And she decides not to. Like, she has this moment of clarity where she couldn't go back to that poor broken girl, whatever. And then as she's walking away, he's like, Sam got what he deserved, or says something kind of like Archer, like exactly what Archer did.
Archer.
And then she turns and she's like, wrong thing to say. And then she's like, that's how I see it playing out in my mind.
I could see either of those options. Yes.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up my predictions, I think we will finally circle back to Caltaine, Roland, and Duke Parrington. They have basically disappeared from the series, but as you said, with Morath, I think we're going to go there and see what is going on with them. I do think that we will unfreeze magic in Aurelia in this book. I just don't see how the story can progress without that happening. We need magic unlocked. Otherwise, Aelin is not really powerful enough to do anything against the king with just her mortal form. We need magic against magic. I think that there will be a notable character death. No one's super, super big, but big enough that it hurts more than Cain, Nehemia, and Sorscha.
Girl, why'd you list Cain first? That was
I did it in order of the books that they died in. Cain died in TOG, Nehemia died in Com, and Sorscha died in Heir of Fire.
You should have done
Sam.
Sorscha, Cain. Oh, yeah, and Sam.
Whoops. Listen, I did it in chronological order of the books. Okay, my bad.
Okay.
But you're right.
I see.
Cain and Nehemia and Sorscha, one does not belong. You're
Cain didn't hurt at all.
You're right. It didn't. I don't know why I included him. A character dies in every book, right? And I think I just mentally logged that out. So, sorry.
Okay.
A character we actually
got you.
care about. Okay, that's my bad.
And
might be.
Yeah.
And so I think someone bigger than a Nehemia, Sam, or Sorscha. Because to be honest, Sorscha's death, I was like, that's so sad. Anyway, and then last but not least, I think Manon will decide to, or will actually defect from the witches, and hopefully the King of Otterlin.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know.
Ooh, Manon go and set the witches on a new path. Manon,
our queen. Aelin, our queen. Manon, our queen. I'll take him.
Anyways, okay. Well, that ends the episode. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad that you found this. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and check out our social media pages to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today. So stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you all next week for our very first episode of Queen of Shadows.
Woo! Bye! And stay tuned for some bloopers, because there are a lot in this episode.
When to win?
Whiff-toad?
Actually?
Okay, that's enough. She looked at Maeve. She looked at Maeve. Damn it. I don't know why, but Manon leapt off of Bractus. But Manon, I forgot. I keep forgetting to breathe. Manons. Oh, damn. Ooh, been a while. Okay. The next Manon. Live a little, Manon. I still hear
a little Manon.
I still hear live a little Sarnothian in my head. Yeah, like rent free.
And I do see that Allison.
I
don't know why it came out like that.
I get that a lot. I pick up a lot of pizzas for Allison. They're like, we don't have an Addison, we have an Allison. I'm like, that's me.
I think it was like Addison and Lorraine, and then it combined until I don't even know.
Oh, our couple name is Allison. Elaine. Elaine. Elaine?
Aedion.
That's too close to Addison, okay? Me and
Yeah, I know,
Aedion already have that. I thought it'd be better in the morning, but apparently not. Whoops. Don't go out of order, okay, Lorraine? It's too confusing. My simple brain can't follow it.
In the state of Aurelia.
Arilla.
Aurelia.
Arilla. Whiftold. Awilla. Whelwyn. We're so good at this, guys. Yes,
The
definitely
great
continue
ocean.
listening. The great ocean.
Ocean.
Oh, God.
Okay. Deep breath.
Deep breath. I knew I was going to start it again. I knew I shouldn't have said it.
Oh, sorry, I had to yawn.
Hey, we're crying, not yawning, okay?
No. Okay, it was. Oh, no, just.
Take this out.
Bye.
When they kill the king, we should do Bye 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 by NSYNC. I don't want to be a fool for you. You're just another player in the game for two. Okay, oh my God, I'll focus. I'm sorry. I can't stop thinking about music.